LoveLore Library. Chapter 90. Okay, please wait a moment. Meg nodded and walked to the kitchen. He saw Harrison's look, but since they were ordering separately, it didn't conflict with the rules, so he didn't say anything. It wasn't a big deal for best friends to do this kind of thing, and he wasn't that inflexible. Palmer and Parber have also fallen in love with this Yangzhou fried rice, haven't they? Harrison asked George with a smile after Mag entered the kitchen. Yes, the two little ones love it so much. Even Angus wants to have a taste. However, the little ones have just started to grow their teeth, so they can only eat a little egg. Speaking of children, George's smile was exceptionally bright. Okay, then I'll take my share back to the kids. Tell them Uncle Harrison bought it for them, and I'll take them to the racecourse next time. Harrison nodded with a smile. Okay. The kids are still talking about your two little white horses. George nodded, and the two of them began to talk about the stud farm. Harrison's family had a stake in a stud farm, and he'd even asked George if he wanted to invest some money to buy some horses and expand the stud farm. It would be more interesting if it was a large stud farm like the ones in Rodu that could be used for horse racing. Crassus finished 2 plates of Yangzhou fried rice quietly. He still couldn't think of a way to persuade Meg, so he was a little depressed. He had a few old friends in Chaos City, but he couldn't bring himself to ask them for help for this kind of thing. Moreover, if those fellows were to come up with a solution, it would most likely be knives and gold. He did not want his precious disciple to learn magic from him unwillingly from the start. Without initiative, one would not be able to learn magic well, because the process was destined to be boring. Half-beard Grandpa, don't be sad. Although I can't go far with you to teach you fireball magic, you can stay here and let me teach you. You can go home after you learn it, Amy said to Crassus with a serious look. Amy looked at Crassus and said seriously. White-bearded Grandpa's beard had been burned by her. He seemed to be quite pitiful. Not only was he unable to walk properly, but his magic was also very poor. It was really worrying. However, Crassus's eyes lit up at the sight of Amy's pitiful gaze, as if he had been enlightened. If he had been more flexible, he wouldn't have had to return to the road to Magus Tower. Perhaps Meg would have agreed. However, if that was the case, then the original plan had to be changed. He had to get them to transport some things to Rodu. Young lady, the bill please. Thinking of this, Crassus took out 2 dragon coins and placed them on the table with a smile on his face. That's a total of 12 gold coins. It's 8 gold coins for your change. Amy took 2 dragon coins from the table and handed 8 gold coins to Crassus. She looked at him strangely and thought to herself, is it such a good thing to learn fireball from me? Goodbye, young lady. Crassus put away the gold coins, picked up his magic caster's staff, and walked towards the door with a smile on his face. Although it might be a little troublesome, on second thought, he didn't want to go back to the Magus Tower where he had stayed all his life. It was so gloomy. That guy used to call it the Coffin Tower. In comparison, the air in Chaos City seemed to be filled with the smell of freedom. More importantly, he could eat delicious food here and take in a precious disciple. The rest of his life was quite good. The customers watched Crassus leave with a little confusion in their hearts. They didn't understand why his mood had suddenly improved. Sargeras lowered his head slightly, and didn't dare to look into Crassus' eyes. He had thought Crassus would scold and warn him, but he just glanced at him and opened the door to leave. Phew. You scared me. Sargeras heaved a sigh of relief. He looked back at Crassus' receding figure and continued to bite into the Ruggiamo in his hand. He could clearly feel his blood boiling, and it kept breaking through the bottleneck in his bloodline. There seemed to be something that he longed for sealed in there. The impact wasn't strong, but it gave him unprecedented hope. He was addicted to the feeling that he could evolve as long as he kept eating Ruggiamo. Right. If it works for me, it should also work for the lava warriors. Most of them haven't reached the second stage of evolution yet, so the effect should be stronger. I should go back and ask them to come and try this Rugiamo. Then I'll set up an adventure team to do high-level missions and earn money to buy Rugiamo. Sargeras nodded. The lava demons had been quiet for many years, and it was time for them to show their prowess. After thinking for a while, he murmured to himself, "Why don't we call ourselves the Burning Legion?" After a busy night, Meg refused to order any more food at 9 o'clock. After the remaining customers finished eating and paid, he closed the door and let out a long sigh of relief. He was a little tired after 4 hours of non-stop work. He sat down on a chair at the door, and decided to take a rest before cleaning the restaurant. "Father, we sold 305 Rugiamos and 76 rainbow fried rice today," Amy said as she walked over and put Ugly Duckling on the ground. She stood on her tiptoes and began to massage Mag's back. "Father, we sold 305 Rugiamos and 76 rainbow fried rice today." "Yes." The income doubled. Meg's eyes lit up. After deducting the cost, the net income was more than 900 gold coins. It was a good decision to increase the supply of Rugiamo today. In the evening, there were more than 50 new customers. Most of them were regulars, and some were attracted by the lively atmosphere in the restaurant. The progress of the 1,000-person mission had been reached. At this speed, the mission should be completed in 15 days. More than 400 Rugiamos had been sold. According to the current progress, the mission would be completed in 2 days, and the tofu pudding would be unlocked. The thought of having a bowl of piping hot tofu pudding filled his heart with excitement. "Father, we've been eating Rugiamo for several days. When will there be something new?" Amy asked expectantly as she massaged Meg's back. "Yes. In 2 days, I'll make something new for you." Meg smiled and stroked Amy's head. He hesitated for a moment, and then looked at her seriously. "Amy, do you want to learn magic?" Chapter 91. "Yes, I believe you." Meg nodded with a smile. Looking at the sensible Amy, he felt a little sorry for her. In his memory, when Meg Alex used to go out, there would often be naughty kids following behind him and imitating the way he walked. They even threw small stones at him. Although he tried his best not to let Amy see this scene, she still saw it a few times. The image of the little girl crying and standing in front of him to make those naughty kids go away was still deeply imprinted in his mind. The idea of her becoming super strong to protect him was probably born from that time. Meg looked at Amy, who had a serious expression on her little face, and couldn't help but reach out to pick her up. He held her in his arms and kissed the hair on her forehead gently. The feeling of being placed first in his heart by the person he loved the most made him feel warm in his heart, but his nose was a little sour. "Don't worry, Father will also become more and more powerful. I should be the one protecting Amy. Amy just needs to be happy every day." Meg whispered in Amy's ear. He was not a good father to let her carry so many things on her shoulders at such a young age. But Amy raised her head from Meg's arms. Meg knew what Amy wanted to say. He shook his head with a smile and said, "The day after tomorrow is the restaurant's rest day. Let's go out and play for a whole day, and then go to Chaos School. If Amy wants to learn magic, she can go and see if there are suitable magic casters there." "Really?" Amy's eyes lit up when she heard that. She looked at Meg with her big blue eyes in disbelief. However, she was a little hesitant, and said, "But Amy said that she wanted to teach Half-Beard Grandpa the fireball spell. Won't he say that I lied to him?" Meg shook his head with a smile, and said, "He's actually a very powerful magic caster, but he wanted to take Amy to a faraway place to learn magic, so he was rejected by Father." You don't have to worry that he can't learn the fireball spell, because he knows it himself. Is that really the case? But he didn't even manage to catch Amy's fireball. He even burned off his beard, Amy said doubtfully. That's because little me's fireball technique is really powerful. So, if you use fireball technique in the future, you must first consider whether the opponent can withstand it. Otherwise, if you use fireball technique, they might really be roasted. Meg nodded with a smile, but her expression became serious as she spoke. Once you have power, you must learn to control it. Although Amy was still young, Meg was already planning to slowly shape her worldview. She didn't have to be a saint, but he didn't want her to grow up to be a demon. Kindness was not a bad quality, and moderation was a philosophy of life. After being smashed into this world by the heavenly axiom, he slowly began to understand this principle. No matter what, there had to be a limit. Otherwise, even if people didn't take you in, the heavens would. Okay, Xiaomi will remember. Amy nodded seriously. Then, she looked down at Ugly Duckling, which was squatting on the ground and looking up at them. She murmured, "If I roast it, meow." Ugly Duckling seemed to have felt a chill run down its neck, and it couldn't help but shrink its head. At times like this, it felt that its little owner was very scary. Alright, then play with Ugly Duckling for a while. If you're tired, go upstairs and sleep first. I'll clean the restaurant. Meg stroked Amy's hair with a smile, and put her down on the ground. Ugly Duckling, Mushroom Fairy, and I have to wait for father to sleep together. Amy shook her head. She picked up Ugly Duckling and sat down on the high stool. She turned on the music box and hummed along to it. Suddenly, she looked up at Meg, who was wiping the table, and said, "Father, if I sing to Teacher Luna the next time I see her, will she be very happy?" "Of course." Meg nodded with a smile. Amy really liked Teacher Luna. However, Amy was only 4 years old, and wasn't old enough to enroll in Chaos School. Teacher Luna had taken the initiative to let her into the classroom before. Meg was also planning to contact the teachers in the school to see if they could give Amy some elementary education related to magic on their own behalf. Now that Amy had learned the fireball magic on her own, if she didn't have a basic understanding of magic, she might not be able to control this power well. She didn't want her precious daughter to become a naughty child in the eyes of others. Being childish and being uneducated were two different things. Then Amy will learn hard and sing to Father and Teacher Luna. Amy nodded. Her little face was full of seriousness as she hummed along. Meg smiled, and his hands became much more nimble. Amy was slowly getting used to not using the word adult. Although she still used it subconsciously sometimes, Meg didn't mind. Sometimes, he still found it quite cute, so he just let her be. Meg cleaned up the dining room, and marinated the cured meat that was going to be used the day after tomorrow. After washing his hands, he came out. Amy had already fallen asleep on the counter, and Ugly Duckling was also sleeping peacefully in her arms. Only the music box was still singing tirelessly, but the sound seemed to have become a little hoarse. "System, the quality of this music box that sells for 5,000 can't be so bad, right? It hasn't even been a day, and it's already broken." Meg raised his eyebrows. "Host, this music box doesn't have a perpetual motion machine, so when the battery runs out, the sound quality will change. Host, please buy 4 number 4 batteries to restore the music box to normal," the system's calm voice sounded. "You actually gave such a high-class music box with number 4 batteries. Normally, it would at least come with a lithium battery charger." Meg felt that his soul of ridicule was awakening. This music box has a detailed manual on the introduction page, and it clearly states that the power source is 4 number 4 batteries. The system is honest, but if the host has other requirements, the system can provide modification services. There are 4 levels of packages to choose from. the system's voice was still calm. Wait. Meg looked at the list of level 4 packages that suddenly popped up in his mind. He felt as if he had stepped into the system's trap. The situation was urgent, so naturally, he didn't have time to read the manual carefully. However, the system had deliberately set a trap for him, and now it was acting as if it would change it for him if he paid more, which made him feel inexplicably uncomfortable. As for the level 4 package, it would have been better if he hadn't looked at it. After reading it, he couldn't help but want to laugh. Level 1 package, Power Source Modification. For number 4 batteries can be modified into supercapacity lithium batteries. Charge for 3 minutes, last for 3 hours, and can be used continuously for 3 days. Modification discounted price, 10 gold coins. Free original charger. Level 2 package, Power Source Modification plus Outfit Change. Provides 10 sets of cute clothes for the doll to change into. No need to disassemble, 1 button to change clothes. Modification discounted price, 20 gold coins. Chapter 92. System, can I swear? Meg looked at the last 2 designs that could even be upgraded to holographic projection, and the price was even 100 gold coins, then 200 gold coins. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows, and say, why don't we just buy a new one? Host, please respect yourself. Insulting the system may trigger a hidden mission, the system said seriously. Okay. I bought a watch last year. It's pretty. Meg nodded. He glanced at the level 4 set that could upgrade the holographic projection and perform all kinds of dances. He was indeed tempted. However, after looking at the price of 200 gold coins, he hesitated for a while before saying, upgrade to the level 1 set. The most important thing now was to save money. Amy was still a novelty to the music box. She hadn't even learned the first song, so there was no need to upgrade it to holographic mode. 10 gold coins have been deducted. The upgrade is in progress and will be completed in 5 minutes. The battery will be fully charged after the modification, the system said. Meg looked at the empty counter where the music box used to be. The system would charge it anyway, so he didn't want to wait here. He picked up Ugly Duckling, and then slowly carried Amy upstairs. Amy was sleeping soundly, so Meg didn't want to wake her up. He put the 2 little ones on the bed, and then went downstairs to turn off the light. After washing up, Meg stood beside the little bed and looked at Amy, who was sleeping soundly, with a smile on his face. He didn't expect to have such a cute little daughter. This transmigration, which was supposed to be a punishment, suddenly became so beautiful. He now had many beautiful expectations and visions for his future life. Starting from the restaurant, he would slowly integrate into Chaos City and this multiracial world. The next day, Meg got up early. He had been busy the whole day, and he had started preparing ingredients. He didn't know until he became a restaurant owner that the breakfast restaurant had to start preparing in advance. He had skipped the step of buying fresh ingredients. Today's business was even better than yesterday. The fact that Ruggiamo could help one lose weight had been spread by word of mouth, so there were several groups of fat customers. The largest group was a group of 8 rich ladies, who were even bigger than Harrison and the others. When they sat down, Meg was a little worried that the chairs would collapse. Fortunately, the custom-made chairs, which cost 10 gold coins each, were quite sturdy. After eating the Ruggiamo, the scene was even more crazy. The customers nearby couldn't close their mouths. Meg didn't dare to look too much. It was a bit too much for his eyes. In the evening, a customer took a Ruggiamo and asked Meg, Mr. Mac, the sign at the door says 1 to rest day. Is your restaurant not open tomorrow? That's right. The restaurant will be closed for 1 day every 6 days. Today just so happens to be the 6th day of operation, so tomorrow is the day off. Meg nodded with a smile. He had already lost count of how many times he had explained this today. Oh, I see. I was thinking of bringing my wife and children here tomorrow. That customer was a little disappointed upon hearing that. He thought for a moment before trying to persuade Mag again. Your business is so good, so how much money are you losing if you don't open for business for a day? Besides, if some customers come tomorrow and your restaurant is not open, they might not come again. Look at other restaurants, they're open all year round. You're making us very uncomfortable. Yes, Mr. Mac, after eating your food, I can't eat other people's food. If I don't eat tomorrow, I will starve to death. Mr. Mac, so many of our regular customers will come here every day. If your business is going to be long-term, you can't just eat fish in 3 days and dry the net in 2 days. Isn't this torture for us? They were a little addicted to the food, and would crave for it if they didn't eat for a day. Now that they heard that Mag was going to take a day off, they were all trying to make him change his mind. They were even threatening him. You won't starve to death if you don't eat for a day. This is the rule set before the restaurant opened. I am the only one who can cook, and I have to leave some time to deal with other things, so I can't rest all year round. Meg shook his head and refused directly. Hearing this, the customers looked at each other. Meg didn't want to negotiate at all. Ordinary restaurant owners would tremble with fear when asking for a day off, and would even squat in the restaurant all day long for fear that their regular customers would run away. No one would be as capricious as Meg. However, these days, Meg had strictly adhered to the restaurant's opening hours. Even if there were dozens of people waiting outside, he wouldn't open the restaurant 1 minute earlier. Once the opening hours were over, even if there were still a bunch of customers who wanted to order, he would refuse without hesitation. Therefore, these words were just a struggle. After seeing off the last group of customers, Meg closed the door and breathed a long sigh of relief. Finally, he could rest tomorrow. He could understand the customer's vision of eating delicious food every day, but compared with playing with Amy, it was nothing for them to eat 1 day less every week. Not having holidays was already his biggest compromise. Today's turnover was basically the same as yesterday's, which was already the limit of what he and Amy could do. There were less than 300 Ruggiamos left, and they could unlock them after a day's rest. The power supply of the music box was changed, but Amy didn't notice that after humming along for 2 days, the little girl could now sing the whole song along with the original singer. Her musical talent was indeed not something he could compare with. "Father, are we going to the school to see Teacher Luna today?" Amy asked excitedly the next day, after waking up early in the morning. She climbed down from her small bed and climbed onto Meg's bed. Meg, who rarely had a day without setting an alarm, opened his eyes in a daze and happened to meet Amy's clear and bright big eyes. The curtains were pulled open a little. It was probably Amy. He glanced at the alarm clock on the bedside table. It was already 8 o'clock. He hadn't slept so well in days. "Yes, the restaurant is not open today. After breakfast, we can go out and play all day." Meg nodded. He sat up, smiled, picked up Amy, who was lying on the quilt, and tickled her. Amy giggled. Amy waved her short little hands and wanted to tickle Meg too. The father and daughter's laughter echoed in the room. Meow, meow. Ugly Duckling jumped back and forth on the ground. It even tried to stand up on its hind legs to see what was going on above, but it couldn't see anything with its short legs. It could only cry aggrievedly. It was kicked out of bed again today. Chapter 93. I want 2 pigtails, and I want to wear a purple dress with a flower on the chest and white shoes. Wouldn't that make me look like the mushroom fairy? Mag nodded. Amy nodded, and then said, I want to have 2 pigtails, and wear a purple dress with a flower on the chest and white shoes. Yes, that would make you a cuter Amy fairy than the mushroom fairy. Meg nodded with a smile. He got out of bed and helped Amy change into the little dress from the wardrobe. Then he tied her hair into 2 ponytails skillfully. After this period of practice, tying hair was a piece of cake for Meg. However, Amy was very satisfied with this hairstyle and had no intention of changing it, so she didn't have a chance to show off her other hairstyles. After putting on the little white shoes, Amy turned around and looked at Meg. Father, do I look good? Yes, you are indeed a super beautiful fairy. Meg's eyes lit up, and he nodded seriously. She was even cuter than the fairy in the music box. Meow, Ugly Duckling came over and rubbed its head gently against Amy's calf. It felt a little wrong that no one had responded to it for so long. Ugly Duckling, don't waste the dress. You won't look pretty in it anyway. Amy bent down to pick up Ugly Duckling and sighed. Meow, Ugly Duckling raised its paw and put it in front of its face. It opened its eyes wide and meowed cutely, trying to prove that it wasn't ugly. You look even uglier now. Amy reached out and turned its face to the side with a look of disgust. Meow, Ugly Duckling turned its face away with tears of despair in its eyes. Meg shook his head with a smile. If it were another owner, this cute little orange cat would definitely be spoiled to the heavens. However, for Amy, it was just a reserve of food. She would torture it every day. After washing up and going downstairs, Meg looked at the door. There were a few customers outside looking in through the glass window. They were pleasantly surprised to see Meg. Soon, there was a knock on the door. System, do you sell removable blinds? Meg frowned slightly. He suddenly felt that he needed to add something to the glass windows when he was not in business. Otherwise, he would always feel like he was being spied on. The host currently does not have the authority to allow the system to transform the restaurant. If you want to transform the restaurant, you can upgrade the restaurant to level 1. The system will transform the restaurant once for free within a certain range. The host's serious voice sounded. Then help me measure the size of the French window, Meg said calmly. It's 3.6 meters tall, the system replied quickly. Meg nodded and said, then give me a pair of this size that can be raised and lowered, as well as the supporting parts. The system will repeat itself. The host does not have the authority to make the system modify the restaurant, the system said seriously. So, from the beginning to the end, did I allow you to modify me? I just want to buy it. Don't be so eager. Aren't you a proper gourmet system? Meg curled his lips and said with a hint of mockery. The system silently floated a line of ellipses, then said seriously, the system is a proper god of cookery system. It does not provide blinds, 5 gold coins. Meg said calmly. A proper system, the system emphasized. 6 gold coins. If it's higher, I'll go by bamboo mats. The primary color bamboo mats look good when hung up. Meg raised his eyebrows and said calmly. The system was silent, as if it was struggling. After a while, it said hesitantly, add a little more. No. Meg's lips curled up. This system really had no integrity. It flatly refused. Add another 4 gold coins, and the system can provide blinds that match the color and material of the restaurant the best. It can be raised and lowered automatically. It can be hidden perfectly when it's closed and can block all prying eyes when it's down. It can also provide a full set of installation tools that can accurately position and punch holes. It's a foolproof installation. I guarantee you'll be satisfied, the system said in a tempting voice. Forget it. It's too heavy. I can't lift a 4-meter-long blinds. It's even more unrealistic to install them myself. I'd better go out and find a good seller who can deliver them to my door and install them for free. Meg shook his head and said regretfully. The system fell into silence again. Father, look, the customers are here again. We're not open for business today, right? Amy looked up at Meg and asked confusedly when she saw the customers outside who were leaning against the window and looking in and constantly knocking on the door. Yes, we're not open for business today, but they still want to come and eat. Have a seat, and I'll go get you a glass of water before making breakfast. Meg nodded with a smile before turning and walking into the kitchen. The signboard at the entrance was already very clear. Meg planned to explain it to the customers who hadn't left yet when he left, but he was most likely going to get a lot of sighs again. Meg wasn't in a hurry to urge the system, which had fallen silent. In any case, he couldn't be bothered to do it himself. After all, it was unrealistic for him to install such a large blinds on his own. However, if he asked someone else to help him with the automatic design, he would have to explain a lot of things, so it was naturally easiest for the system to do the installation. Why can't these guys let Father have a good day's rest? Furthermore, we're going to see Teacher Luna today. Amy looked back at Meg as she softly murmured to herself. She clenched her little fists and walked toward the door with Ugly Duckling in her arms. There were still a dozen or so customers outside the door. Some of them hadn't come for breakfast yesterday, so they didn't hear Meg's explanation, while others had come early in the morning to try their luck after hearing Meg's explanation. Perhaps Mr. Mack would open the door after seeing so many customers. However, the restaurant, which usually opened at 7:30, was still closed today. Seeing the countdown on the door, many customers left after waiting for a long while. After all, they couldn't afford to disrupt the rhythm of their day for breakfast. Some customers, who had walked a long way to get here, were unwilling to leave without eating. So, a dozen or so of them stayed behind and discussed whether they would say something nice to Meg or say something harsh to make Meg make a ruggiamo for each of them before they left. Sargeras was also in the crowd. He had been lucky yesterday to complete a high-level mission and kill 3 flamingos. He had received a reward of 80 gold coins, and had saved some gold coins to come for breakfast today. However, such a mission didn't come every day, and it depended on luck to complete it on the first try. So, his original plan of 10 ruggiamos per meal was reduced to 5. He had heard Meg's explanation yesterday, but before he went to accept the mission, he still wanted to try his luck. Now, he stood behind the crowd and didn't rush forward. When they heard that Meg was coming downstairs, they all looked at the door expectantly, hoping that Meg would change his mind after seeing their enthusiasm. Ding dong. The bell at the door rang, and the door slowly opened inwards. Their expectant eyes were disappointed. They looked down and saw Amy holding the little orange cat with a cold face. Chapter 94. The door suddenly became quiet. The guests looked at each other and looked at Amy, who was holding the kitten and putting her little fist in front of her face. She squinted her eyes and pouted her little mouth. She was trying hard to act fierce. The words that they had prepared were all forcefully swallowed back down. I'm leaving. She's so cute even when she's fierce. Sargeras took a look at Amy, then turned and left slowly. It seemed that he had to buy some barbecue and eat it on the way. Then he would take on a high-level mission and try to live a life where he could eat 10 ruggiamos in one meal as soon as possible. Pfft, so cute. A girl couldn't help laughing. Many customers had seen Amy burn the lava demon with a fireball the day before yesterday. Later, she even used a fireball to burn off the beard of the sorcerer. Not only was the sorcerer not angry, he even wanted to take her as his disciple. So, Amy's words were quite intimidating. After all, she dared to burn a demon, and they didn't have the demon's resistance. didn't they see the demon sneak away after hearing her words? So, they hesitated for a moment, then left. Boss Mag is indeed a man of his word. However, sending his daughter out to solve the problem is too cruel. I'm clearly unhappy, but I can't get angry. How infuriating. A customer heaved a forlorn sigh before bursting into laughter. Yeah, I walked 20 minutes to come here today. But it's not easy for Mr. Mac to run the restaurant alone. He dotes on his daughter so much, so it's normal that he wants to spend some time with her, the person next to him echoed. The rest of the onlookers, who didn't know the truth, looked at Amy, who wasn't going to be reasonable, and then looked at the customers who left without hesitation. They hesitated for a moment, then also left. She's really a little helper. Meg, who came out with a glass of water, saw this scene and couldn't help laughing. He had been thinking about how to explain to the customers so that they wouldn't be sad. He thought he would have to wrangle with them for a while, but he didn't expect Amy to open the door and threaten them directly. Then all the customers left, which saved him a lot of trouble. Father, I told them to go home obediently. When I was super fierce, they were really afraid of me. Amy turned around and looked at Meg with a cute smile on her face again. Her big eyes were saying, hurry up and praise me. Yes, Xiaomi is the best. You've helped Father a lot. Meg smiled and nodded. However, when the little brat was super fierce, it was completely cheating by acting cute. It could only be said that those customers were also very cute. Yes, yes. Amy will do more things for Father in the future. Amy nodded and took a few sips of water from the glass. She then looked down at Ugly Duckling in her arms with a conflicted expression, and said, But Father, are we going to take Ugly Duckling to see Teacher Luna? I'm afraid it's too ugly and will scare Teacher Luna. Why don't we just leave it at home? Meow meow. Ugly Duckling immediately panicked and it heard that it was going to be left at home. It looked up at Amy and meowed with its eyes full of pleading and resentment. Ugly Duckling hasn't eaten yet, so we still have to take it out later. We'll buy it some goat's milk on the way. Meg shook his head. Besides, Miss Luna should like it. After all, Ugly Duckling, which was only a little bigger than an adult's palm, was actually a very cute little orange cat. It was just that Amy's first impression was the strongest, and she probably thought it was ugly no matter how she looked at it. However, after interacting with it for the past few days, she had been quite nice to it. Amy nodded and looked at Ugly Duckling seriously as she warned, All right, then when we see Teacher Luna later, you must cover your face. You can't scare her or the other children. Ugly Duckling didn't know whether it understood or not, but it just nodded vigorously and pretended to understand. After breakfast, Meg took out the small basket that the herb gatherer had given him and put the little milk bottle in the basket with a soft towel in the middle. When Amy got tired of carrying it, she could also put Ugly Duckling in the basket. If they bought something on the way, they could also put it in the basket and carry it. Then, they went out in this way. Meg changed into a black-gray robe today. This was the common clothing in this world. It was a little similar to the traditional Chinese clothing, but it didn't have as many layers as the traditional Chinese clothing, and the tailoring was more neat and simple. After all, in this alternate world, there was no telling when they would run into danger. Simple and comfortable clothes were suitable for fighting and escaping. Meg's robe was the system's improved version and it was tailor-made, so it fit very well. The pure cotton material was much more comfortable than the cotton and linen material in this world, and it looked very energetic. The black-gray robe looked more mature, but it looked a little funny when he was carrying a small basket in his hand. When they passed by the magic potion shop, Amy, Black Coal, and Green Pea tripped over each other as usual. Ugly Duckling was a little hostile to Black Coal, but it couldn't even jump up to Amy's knees now, let alone Black Coal, who was hanging at the height of a person. It could only cry out a few times in Amy's arms. Meg smiled and nodded at Julian, then left with Amy and continued walking. "Father, are we going to the school now?" Amy looked up at Meg and asked. "We'll go to a place to do something first, then go to the school." Meg shook his head with a smile. Other than going to the agency to ask for an employee, he had another place to go. Okay. Amy nodded. Although she really wanted to sing for Teacher Luna right now, she had to listen to her father if he had something to do. In this world, employment agencies were commonly referred to as job agencies. They had gradually appeared after Chaos City became prosperous. Their business had gradually expanded from simply helping workshops and adventurers' guilds recruit suitable employees and members to various fields. Even hiring nannies was only one of the branches. Meg and Amy stopped in front of a shop called Guanloa Job Agency. It was a 20-square-meter shop. There were 2 rectangular wooden boards in front of the door, with a few pieces of paper pasted on them. Neatly written, each job position and number of employees were listed, as well as a simple introduction of the benefits. However, most of the words were face-to-face. Meg glanced at the information on the board. Other than the normal jobs for workshops, there were also all kinds of missions for adventurers' guilds, and what abilities they needed to recruit. This kind of information should have been in the guilds column, but now it was there. There was a separate section for waiters and nannies. At a glance, the basic benefits of waiters were 3 meals a day. The average salary was 3,000 copper coins, and the working hours were usually from morning to night. It was a typical example of a job with a low salary and long working hours. Meg's expression became a little interesting when he saw the information in a small section at the bottom right corner. Looking for a succubus or elven girlfriend. Daily salary starting at 5 gold coins. Exact price will be negotiated based on appearance and skills. Looking for a demon fighter. Must have a scary appearance and be able to withstand a 3rd-tier magic caster's magic. Most importantly, must have a scary appearance. The scarier, the higher the salary. Looking for an elven or human male idol. Must be handsome, know how to coax people, and do it 7 times a night. Daily salary starting at 10 gold coins. Salary can be increased if the job is good. Chapter 95. What the hell is this? Meg raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect this intermediary to be a pimp. How shameless. Although it was still morning, the office was already crowded with people from all races, including humans, orcs, demons, and even angels. They were all squeezed in front of the wall filled with recruitment slips, reading carefully. From time to time, someone would call out a serial number and then communicate with the staff next to them. It seemed that they were all here to look for a job, and they got along very well here. A rather coquettish succubus walked over and winked at Meg, but seeing that he didn't pay any attention to her, she withdrew her gaze and looked directly at the special column. Her eyes suddenly lit up, and she shouted into the office, "Boss, I want to try this girlfriend. I think I can get 10 gold coins a night." Coming. Someone immediately responded, and a balding middle-aged man with a mustache trotted out. He first looked at Meg and Amy, then smiled and greeted the succubus. "Miss Bobla, with your skills, you can even get 15 gold coins a night, let alone 10 gold coins. Come in and register first, and we will inform the investor today. Maybe the transaction can start tonight." "Okay." The succubus nodded. She flicked her fiery red hair at Meg and walked inside, swaying her graceful waist. The smell of cheap perfume that hit him in the face made Meg frown. He had seen all kinds of women in the past, and he despised this kind of bitch who thought she was good with heavy makeup. His taste had changed a few times as he grew older, but he still couldn't get the charm of this kind of woman. In fact, he was even a little disgusted. They were both succubi, but he admired the domineering older sister more. Of course, it was just admiration. Humph, Amy looked at the succubus with a wary expression, and slowly withdrew her hand. This woman with a scarily pale face was trying to seduce father. If she dared to take another step forward, she would have a taste of her fireball magic. The balding middle-aged man looked at Meg with a smile, then turned to Amy, and said, "Hello, sir. I am Chris, the owner of the Broad Recruitment Agency. How can I help you?" He was a little surprised by the cute half-elf girl. Judging from the way he was dressed, Meg was most likely a rich investor. Furthermore, the fact that he had a half-elf daughter indicated that he was very rich. After all, most men who married an elf would be in a very awkward situation. Furthermore, he was showing off his half-elf daughter in public meant that he was still in control of the family's finances. "I want to find a waitress for the restaurant." Meg had initially thought that this agency was a little unreliable, but after thinking about it, he realized that this was an alternate world, and there was a red light district behind the Aiden Square that was open every day, so this wasn't a big deal. This agency was quite large, so it probably had a lot of talent. Do you have any specific requirements?" Chris nodded, and then explained, "Among the waitresses that we have in our agency, there are 3 categories. 1, average looks, hardworking, and the salary requirements are slightly lower. 2, average looks, hardworking, and the salary requirements are medium. 3, beautiful looks, human, succubus, angel. The salary requirements are higher, and the position is more toward the restaurant's business card. The requirements for working hours are slightly higher, and their endurance is relatively lower. So the salary requirements are only based on looks." Meg raised an eyebrow. Those who weren't hardworking could earn high salaries as long as they were good-looking. This really was a world where looks were everything. Many restaurants can increase their turnover by a lot if they find a beautiful waitress. If it's a beautiful and open succubus waitress, the sales of drinks can easily double, so this is a very worthwhile investment. Chris' voice was tinged with a hint of temptation, and he smiled as he said, "Also, many high-priced waitresses don't mind having sex with young bosses. As for working hours, you can also find a couple of hard-working waitresses. Wouldn't that be killing 2 birds with 1 stone? Do you have information on second-rate waitresses? I'd like to take a look." Meg shook his head slightly. All men knew what Chris was implying, but he was never going to rely on a few flirtatious waitresses to increase the number of customers in his restaurant. He wasn't interested in those bitches anyway. What he needed now was a waitress who was quick on her feet and didn't talk much. Of course, her looks couldn't be too frightening, but at the very least, she had to be pleasing to the eyes of the customers. If there was an employee who met this condition, he wouldn't mind giving her a higher salary. Anyway, the restaurant's business was steadily increasing, and improving the overall efficiency would definitely earn him more than paying a single employee. His restaurant didn't need a good-looking vase. "I see. Okay, please come in. There's a reception room on the 2nd floor. You can take your time looking around." Chris nodded and led Meg into the room. Half an hour later, Meg walked out with Amy, a little disappointed. There was indeed a lot of information, but Meg didn't find anyone pleasing to the eye. They were either too old, or a little lacking in temperament. While being hardworking and capable, it would be best if their temperament could be more compatible with the restaurant. This way, the customer's dining experience would be improved. "Mr. Mack, I'll keep an eye out for you. If there's someone who meets your requirements, I'll send someone to contact you immediately," Chris said with a smile as he walked out. If it weren't for the fact that Meg didn't look like he was deliberately looking for trouble, he would have scolded him a little. After accompanying him for half an hour to look at the information, he still didn't find anyone suitable. "Okay, thank you." Meg nodded. "Goodbye, Uncle Bird's Nest." Amy waved her little hand at Chris. Bye. Bye. Chris's face twitched. What the hell is Uncle Bird's nest? But he still had to maintain a smile. They went to the market to buy some goat's milk to feed Ugly Duckling, and then Meg took Amy to an intelligence-gathering shop. It was a human's private detective agency. He spent 10 gold coins to investigate Crassus and the owner of the magic potion shop next door. Of course, the more detailed, the better. Both of them coveted Amy, so he wanted to find out more about them first to see if they were good or bad. Meg didn't have time to collect information himself, so it was obviously a good choice to spend some money to find a professional. After all, the price could be offset by a few Ruggiamos, and it was much easier than relying on others. Father, can we go to the school now? Amy looked up at Meg. They had gone to 2 places in a row, and Ugly Duckling was about to fall asleep in her arms. Chapter 96. The Chaos School was an educational institution under the Grey Temple. According to the age and stage of the students, it was divided into 2 parts, the kindergarten and the How High Kindergarten. The kindergarten was for children from 5 to 12 years old. At that time, they were mainly taught basic knowledge such as the common language, arithmetic, and general knowledge. At the same time, they would develop some special abilities such as magic, perception, calculation, and so on. When they reached a certain level and met the test requirements of the How High Kindergarten, they would automatically be promoted to the How High Kindergarten to further their studies, and there would be special teachers to teach them. Those who couldn't pass the test by the age of 12 would lose the opportunity to stay in the Chaos School and be expelled. The ratio was about 5 to 1. Most of the students who graduated from the How High Kindergarten would be recruited by the Grey Temple to become the new blood of the Grey Temple, thus maintaining the high quality and loyalty of the members of the Grey Temple. Meg didn't dislike this complete supply chain, because every graduate had the freedom to choose whether to work in the Grey Temple or not. Furthermore, not every graduate would be recruited by the Grey Temple. They had to pass the test first. This reminded him of the civil service system in his previous life. Also, the best thing that the Chaos School did was to popularize knowledge on a large scale in Chaos City. After the integration of the Norland continent, the human and elven languages became the common language of the Norland continent. However, it wasn't easy for other races to learn this language in writing. Even Haga, the son of a tribal chief, could barely communicate in the common language. The kindergarten of the Chaos School accepted over 1,000 students every year. The annual tuition was only 5 gold coins. Compared to the tuition of 50 gold coins in private schools, this was practically compulsory education. Also, the students in the Chaos School weren't divided into classes according to race. Your classmates could be a demon and an elf, or a dwarf sitting in front of you and a troll sitting behind you. This was also a unique experience in Chaos City. After more than 100 years of development, the Grey Temple and Chaos School were the main reason why Chaos City was able to have such a harmonious atmosphere. After all, if 2 people of different races were walking on the streets, they might be from the same school, so they would all be familiar with each other. As such, the animosity between different races would lessen significantly. Furthermore, the residents of Chaos City were far more cultured than the residents of other regions on the continent, and this was also an important reason. Meg and Amy were standing outside the gate of the sprawling Chaos School. It was class time, and the old guard and the tall orc standing at the gate had clearly refused their request to enter the school. They were told to contact Teacher Luna after school so that they could enter the school. Looks like we're early. Meg glanced at the large clock at the entrance of Chaos School. It was 10:30 a.m., and the 3rd period hadn't ended yet. School would end at around 11:30 a.m. Father, we can sneak in, Amy said softly as she looked at the stern orc and tugged at Meg's sleeve. Sneak in. Meg looked at Amy in surprise. There's a place we can go in. They didn't let me in before, so I always sneaked in. Amy nodded. 10 minutes later, Meg looked back at the gap covered by 2 lush branches. He couldn't help but pat Amy's head with a smile. This little girl was really something. I know which classroom Teacher Luna is in. Father, let's go and take a look. Amy grabbed Meg's finger and walked to the left with ease. Meg could tell that Amy really wanted to see Miss Luna, so he let her go. She used to watch from outside the classroom anyway. The classrooms in Chaos School were 2-story buildings made of a mixture of stone and wood. The 4 walls were stacked with square black stones, while the roof and the second floor were made of wood. There were windows on both sides to ensure that the classrooms were well lit. The sound of reading could be heard coming from one building after another. All of the buildings were painted sky blue and grass green, and the colors looked very bright and fresh. Many of the walls were painted with childlike drawings, which were most likely drawn by the students. There were styles of all races, and they blended together harmoniously here. The person who founded the Great Temple must have been a great man with great foresight. Meg looked at those drawings, and seemed to see the future that person had envisioned. If this idea could be spread out with Chaos City as the center, and the entire continent could be truly integrated, then the racial war 100 years ago would most likely not happen again. This idea coincides with my thoughts. If all the races on the continent are integrated, there will definitely be more and more half-races. When they become an important part of the entire continent, the discrimination against them will naturally disappear. Meg was deep in thought, and a smile gradually appeared on his face. Perhaps I can witness the arrival of a great era in my lifetime. If I can add some fuel to the fire, that would be a good thing. Father, what are you smiling about? Amy looked at Meg with a perplexed expression. She thought for a moment and said, I know. You're very happy because you want to see Teacher Luna, right? Perhaps. Perhaps it was the sound of reading that made Meg's mood improve a lot. This atmosphere was really good. When Amy is of school age next year, I should let her come to school. It's much better than staying at home with me every day. With Amy's fireball magic, I don't have to worry about anyone bullying her at school. Me too. I'm super happy. Amy also nodded. However, she quickly put a finger in front of her mouth and shushed them. She pointed at the classroom next to them and said, Teacher Luna is teaching in that classroom. Let's sneak over and don't make a sound. Meg nodded and didn't say anything. He walked quietly and followed Amy to the window. There were 2 black square stones stacked under the windowsill. Amy hesitated for a moment before slowly stepping on them. They were just at the height of the windowsill. Looks like these stones were specially prepared for Amy. Meg looked at the 2 stones with surprise. There were no stones under the other windowsills, and the height was just right for Amy. Miss Luna's voice came from the classroom. Standing outside the classroom, it sounded very gentle. It was the kind of voice that could guide students to study, and it made people feel at ease and comfortable. The content of her lecture was simple multiplication. Because there was no multiplication table or decimal system, the algorithm was very complicated. Just a question of 7 by 9 was enough to make Meg dizzy. It was really difficult for 6 or 7-year-old children. Amy listened quietly, and her eyes seemed to light up as she looked into the classroom. Meg also stood quietly behind her. It was fine if he listened in, but it was a little inappropriate to disturb others in class. Chapter 97. Meg looked down and saw that ugly duckling, which had been asleep for a while, had woken up. After it called out once, it looked at Amy and called out a few more times, each time louder than the last. Meg cursed in his heart. The classroom quieted down immediately. Luna looked at the window in confusion, thinking that some stray cat had run into the school and attracted the attention of the students. However, she soon saw Amy. Her eyes lit up, and she quickly walked to the door in surprise. "It's Amy. Long time no see. Wow, your hair is so beautiful." A girl with mushroom hair sitting by the window saw Amy, and her eyes lit up immediately as she spoke happily. "Shoo, Daphne. Don't call my name in class, and don't talk to me," Amy quickly said. "Why are you here again? You're causing me a lot of trouble like this. Do you know that?" A little demon child with messy hair and a green bean sprout like grass on his head said seriously to Amy. "Shut up, Ignatsu. Be careful or I'll pull out that bean sprout of yours again," Daphne said fiercely as she turned to glare at the little demon child. "I'm not afraid of you," Ignatsu said as he leaned back, putting on a brave front. "Ugly duckling, don't call out. Otherwise, I'll roast you and eat you." Amy turned to glare at Ugly Duckling and the basket, and reprimanded it. Ugly Duckling was probably traumatized by this sentence since it was an egg. It immediately cowered in the basket and shivered, not daring to call out again. Meg stroked its fur gently to calm it down. This trauma was probably going to follow it for the rest of its life. "Amy, you're here." Luna walked out of the door with a piece of chalk in her hand and a smile on her face. Halfway through her sentence, she saw Meg standing behind her with a small basket in his hand. She paused in surprise. "Teacher Luna, I'm here to listen to your lecture and see you. I also want to sing for you." Amy looked at Luna with a happy smile on her little face. But when she looked around the classroom, she said dejectedly, "But I think I'm affecting everyone's class again." Meg patted Amy's head and looked at Luna apologetically. "I'm sorry, I was the one who brought the child here." The cat was careless and meowed twice and disturbed Miss Luna's class. Today, Luna was wearing a powder blue maxi dress. She was still wearing the same silk scarf with a golden lily embroidered on it. It seemed that she really liked that scarf. When she looked at Amy, she had a gentle smile on her face. Of course not. The kitten's meowing piqued the curiosity of the children. Besides, everyone misses Amy, who hasn't come for many days. Luna looked at the dejected Amy and Meg, who was taking all the blame on himself. She smiled and reached out to hold Amy's little hand. In a gentle voice, she said, "Bring your new friend and introduce her to everyone. After that, sing the song that you want to sing for me." Meg looked at Luna. In that instant, her face seemed to be glowing. He was a little touched by her gentle encouragement. She really was a good teacher. Really? Amy's eyes lit up again. She looked at Luna with an encouraging smile on her face. She got down from the rock and picked up Ugly Duckling from the basket. She looked at Meg and said, "Father, then I want to go, Amy. You can do it." Meg smiled with an encouraging expression on his face. Luna also looked at Meg with a little surprise. It was rare to see a father who could understand his daughter's feelings and know how to encourage her. Thinking of the Ruggiamo that she had eaten the other day, Luna's heart raced involuntarily. Although the reaction after eating it was a little shameful, the young Joe fried rice and Ruggiamo were really delicious. If it weren't for the fact that the money sent by her family this month had been used to buy food for the children, she probably wouldn't have been able to resist the urge to eat it again. This man's cooking is so good. She had never tasted anything better than this. Thinking back to it now, she still couldn't help but salivate. Okay. Hearing Meg's encouragement, Amy's face immediately lit up with confidence. She held Luna's hand and walked into the classroom. Meg stood by the window, smiling at Amy, who was wearing a purple dress and holding Ugly Duckling in her arms. Standing here again, she was no longer the little girl in shabby clothes. What he hoped more was that she could become more confident. Our Amy hasn't come to class for many days. Do you miss her very much? Luna looked at the children below the podium and said with a smile. Yes. I miss her so much. Daphne was the first to cry out. She looked at Amy, who had changed into a new dress and tied up her beautiful hair, as if she had become a completely different person. Not really. Ignatius shook his head, but he couldn't take his eyes off Amy. How did she suddenly become so beautiful and delicate like a porcelain doll? The other children also looked at Amy curiously. How did the half-elf with messy hair who always wore shabby clothes in their memories become so beautiful and cute all of a sudden? She was much cuter than the little elf in the next class. And when the children's eyes fell on Ugly Duckling in Amy's arms, their eyes lit up. It was so fluffy and small, but it was so cute. They really wanted to hug it and touch it. And it was white and orange. It was different from the black and white cats outside. It looked even cuter. It was the first time Amy had received so many admiring and envious gazes. She was nervous, but also very happy. No one was looking at her with disgust and pity anymore. This feeling was so good, and she couldn't help but smile. Luna also had a smile on her face. Although she had always wanted to make Amy more confident, every time she was bullied, the little girl would become more depressed and lose confidence. But after not seeing her for a few days, Amy seemed to have become a completely different person. Not only did her clothes change, but more importantly, her heart became stronger, and she became more confident. She was no longer troubled by the difference between herself and others. Naturally, it could only be Meg who had brought about this change. This made Luna a little curious. Why did Meg suddenly become so caring and protective of Amy, as if he had become a different person? Amy brought a new friend today, and she even prepared a song to sing for everyone, Luna said with a smile as she looked at Amy encouragingly. This is Ugly Duckling, my. Amy hugged Ugly Duckling and introduced it, but she soon stopped, as if she was a little conflicted about its position. After a while, she said, Father said it will become a white swan when it grows up. Before it grows up, it will be my pet. A white swan. The children's curiosity was immediately piqued. They looked at the orange kitten in Amy's arms, and couldn't understand how this cute kitten was ugly. It didn't look like a duck at all. And would it really become a white swan when it grew up? Chapter 98. Because it's ugly, Amy said matter-of-factly. Then, she added, and it came out of an egg. I've never seen such an ugly duckling before. It came out of an egg. If it's a duckling, then it's really ugly. Yeah, a duckling that looks like a kitten. It's so strange. No wonder its color is different from normal kittens. But it's so ugly and cute. After hearing Amy's words, the children very easily accepted the fact that Ugly Duckling really was an ugly duckling. As a duckling, it was indeed very ugly to look like a kitten, but it also looked quite cute. Meow. Ugly Duckling protested feebly. It was clearly so cute. Luna looked at Ugly Duckling in Amy's arms, and also felt that it was so furry and cute. She really wanted to give it a hug. She naturally didn't believe Amy's words that it could become a white swan. It seemed that Meg was wrong. I want to sing a song for Teacher Luna and everyone today. Amy's confidence was greatly boosted after receiving everyone's approval. She looked at Meg outside the window with a smile, and continued, It's called Little Girl Who Picks Mushrooms. This guy clearly doesn't know anything, Ignatius murmured. Ignatius muttered under his breath, but after Daphne glared at him, he shut his mouth obediently. However, he still didn't believe that Amy could sing any good songs. Yes, I'm looking forward to it, Luna said with a smile. Little ant who picks mushrooms, carries a big bamboo basket. Amy held Ugly Duckling in her arms and began to sing earnestly. Her soft and lively voice immediately attracted the attention of the children. It was as if an arrow had struck the softest part of their hearts, and smiles appeared on their faces involuntarily. My daughter really is the best. Meg looked at the children in the classroom who were enchanted by her singing, then looked at Amy, and his heart was filled with pride. This was the first time that he had heard Amy sing this song in its entirety. Even though there was no accompaniment, Amy's soft voice was still very pleasant to listen to. In fact, he felt that it was even better than the music on the music box. Very good. Ignaz's eyes were wide open, and the green bean sprout on his head swayed left and right, looking very happy. Amy is so awesome. Daphne cupped her chin in her hands, completely turning into a fangirl. The other children also had similar expressions. They were a little surprised at how Amy had suddenly become so amazing. Then, their feelings slowly turned into envy and admiration. She was really amazing. It's a nice nursery rhyme, but why haven't I heard this song before? Could it be a children's song from somewhere? Did he teach Amy? Luna was also pleasantly surprised. She had thought that Amy would sing the nursery rhyme she had taught her before, but she did not expect her to sing a nursery rhyme that she had never heard before. She could not help but glance at Meg outside the window. Could it be that he had also taught Amy this song? After she finished singing, Amy looked at the audience below the podium, feeling a little embarrassed but also a little expectant. She did not know if she had sung well. Nice! Ignazu was the first to clap his hands, and then there was a burst of applause and praise in the classroom. A bright smile appeared on Amy's face. This was the first time she had been acknowledged by so many people, and they were all her peers. This feeling was unprecedented. Yes, I also think that Amy sang very well. Thank you for bringing us such a nice song. Luna also nodded with a smile. You're welcome. Amy nodded happily. She looked back at the question on the blackboard, hesitated for a moment, and then looked at Luna and said, Teacher Luna, I know how to solve this question. Luna was stunned for a moment. She looked at the 7x8 calculation question on the blackboard. This was a question that they had only taught today. The algorithm was a little complicated, and only a few of the more talented students in the class had been able to solve it. Most of the students did not know how to solve it. Amy had not been in class for the past few days, so how could she have solved this question? You definitely can't solve it. This question is a little difficult. Only I can solve it, a little boy in a blue and white shirt in the first row said, his face full of pride. I think it's very simple, Amy said seriously as she looked at the boy. How is that possible? Then solve it for me first. The little boy looked unconvinced. There were only a few students in the class who could solve this question, but Amy said it was very simple. He did not believe it. The other children had similar expressions and felt that Amy definitely could not solve it. Only math geniuses like Teacher Luna and Palmer could solve such a question. Meg looked at the sudden argument and was a little surprised and wanted to laugh. However, this level of multiplication was too easy for Amy, who had memorized the multiplication table. It was time to let them feel the fear of being dominated by the multiplication table. Teacher Luna wanted to ease the atmosphere and bring the matter to an end. After all, Amy had just become confident. It would not be good if she lost her confidence because of this. The answer is 56, Amy looked at Palmer and said calmly. Is it really 56? The children were a little confused. Teacher Luna had not finished explaining how to calculate it, so they did not know the answer. They could only look at Teacher Luna and Palmer. How did you know? Palmer suddenly stood up and stared at Amy. Then he looked at the answer written on the notebook in front of him with a look of disbelief. I calculated it. Amy nodded slightly. The answer is 56. Teacher Luna was no less shocked than the other students. She knew better than anyone that Amy's learning progress was definitely not at this level. However, she was able to answer the question correctly without using a pen and paper. She could not help but wonder if Meg had told Amy the answer when they were outside the classroom. You got it right. Amy is really awesome. Daphne smiled happily. Ignazio looked at Amy strangely from behind, as if this was the first time he had met her. How did she suddenly become as good as Palmer? After receiving Teacher Luna's approval, the other students looked at Amy in a different light. Amy actually knew the answer to a question that no one else could solve with just one look. Didn't that mean she was even better than Palmer? I don't believe it. She must be lucky to get it right. Teacher Amy, give me 5 more questions. Let's see who can solve it first. Palmer felt that his throne as the #1 math genius was being threatened, so he looked at Luna and begged. I agree, Amy said coldly. Chapter 99. Palmer sat down again and looked at the 5 questions on the blackboard. He looked at Amy confidently and said, I'll count to 3, and then we'll start at the same time. Whoever finishes first wins. 1, 64, 42, 72, 48, 63. Done. Amy looked back at the blackboard and calmly reported 5 numbers. Palmer had just finished counting to 3, and before he could close his mouth and start copying the questions on the paper, Amy had already finished. The classroom suddenly fell silent. The children didn't know if Amy had calculated correctly, but she was much faster than Palmer. Palmer hadn't even started, and Amy had already reported the answers. So now they all looked at Teacher Luna, wondering if Amy had said the correct answers. You're not lying, are you? Palmer looked at Amy and asked hesitantly. I calculated it carefully, Amy said seriously and also looked at Luna. 64, 42, 72, 48, 63. All correct. Luna looked at the questions on the blackboard and said the answers one by one. They were exactly the same as Amy's. She was so surprised that she couldn't help but raise her voice a little. This level of arithmetic was not difficult for her, but even she had to think about it in her head before she could come up with an answer. But just now, Amy had said the correct answers just by looking at the questions. This speed was amazing. She was a genius. Amy is so good. Daphne exclaimed softly. She said what the other children were thinking. They had thought that Palmer was the best, but now it seemed that Amy was still better. She's so scary. I can't play with her anymore. People who are good at studying are all crazy. Ignazio looked horrified and shook his head regretfully. I lost. Palmer was silent for a while and nodded seriously. His father had said that as a man, win or lose, he had to be gracious, especially when it came to women. Although he was often beaten by his mother and didn't dare to fight back, so he made this up to comfort himself, Palmer still felt that it was quite right. Yeah, you lost. Amy also nodded, but she didn't look too proud. Instead, she felt that it was only natural. Of course, this attitude made Palmer feel even more depressed. Amazing. This was the only thought many of the children had when they looked at Amy. It turned out that the little girl in shabby clothes had suddenly become so awesome. She was even more awesome than Palmer. The multiplication table of the Great Celestial Empire is indeed powerful. Meg smiled and looked at the little boy. He was quite gentlemanly and looked a little familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen him before. At this time, the bell rang, signaling the end of class. The children immediately put the matter to the back of their minds. Some of them could not wait for Teacher Luna to announce the end of class so that they could go out and play. Alright, class dismissed. Luna had a lot of questions in her mind, so she didn't delay the class. She held Amy's hand and walked out of the classroom. She looked at Meg and said, "Mr. Meg, there are some questions I want to ask you. If you have time, can we talk in my office?" "Sure." Meg smiled and nodded. He had something to ask her anyway. "Mr. Meg, did you teach Amy how to calculate?" When they arrived at the office, Luna gave Amy a candy and let her sit on a small chair to play with. She couldn't help but ask Meg about her doubts. How did Amy learn how to calculate these questions so quickly in such a short time? She had taught Amy many multiplication tables before, but because there were too many of them, she couldn't remember them all. At that level, she definitely couldn't answer them all. "I taught Amy a new multiplication table. At the same time, I changed the algorithm. The calculation process has become simpler, and we can get the answer directly." Meg had no intention of hiding it. Firstly, he trusted Luna more. Secondly, there was no need to hide such things. Let the multiplication table become popular in this world, let everyone memorize the multiplication table. Just thinking about it was an interesting thing. The integration of the various races was the most direct method of war, but it was also the most problematic. If they could use culture to promote the integration, it would be a good thing. A new algorithm. Luna's eyes lit up. She had thought that Meg had been teaching Amy a lot at home. If the simpler algorithm that Meg mentioned really existed, then it would be a revolutionary step for the mathematics world. Her hands couldn't help but tremble a little. She looked at Meg and asked seriously, "Mr. Meg, is the algorithm you mentioned universal?" "It should be universal." Meg nodded. The algorithm had been popularized in China for so many years, so he didn't have to worry about it being universal. However, if he wanted to popularize it in this world, it was obviously not realistic to rely on Luna, a mathematics teacher. At the very least, it would have to be promoted by an organization at the level of the Grey Temple. "Teacher Luna, Father is really super awesome," Amy, who was sitting at the side with Ugly Duckling in her arms, said with pride on her little face. "Mr. Meg, although it's a little abrupt, can I take a look at the new algorithm that you've derived?" Luna looked at Meg sincerely and said, "If you want to publish it, perhaps I can help you. My grandfather is one of the officials in charge of education in the Roth Empire. Although it's inconvenient to reveal his name, he has always been dedicated to popularizing mathematics. It's just that the existing algorithms are too complicated. There aren't many people who have the patience to learn and master them. Even in Chaos School, only about half of the students who graduate from the primary school can pass mathematics every year." Chapter 100. Meg nodded. He asked for a pen and paper, and drew out a complete table of the 9 by 9 multiplication formula. In order to explain it in detail, he wrote down the multiplication terms in reverse, and explained the decimal system algorithm in detail at the same time. The sexagesimal system was currently used on the Norland continent, and there were more than 1,700 terms in the multiplication table. If the multiplication and division of more than 2 digits were involved, the calculation would become extremely complicated. If one could do the division of more than 3 digits, they could be regarded as a mathematical expert. Therefore, if they wanted to implement the multiplication table, the first thing they had to change was this complicated system. History had proven that the decimal system invented by the wise men of China was the simplest and most universal system. Coupled with the multiplication table, it was enough to solve most of the mathematical problems in life. That was an era when the ancient people of China crushed the world in arithmetic. Luna watched from the side. Her eyes became brighter and brighter, and her mouth opened wider and wider. As an arithmetic teacher who grew up in a family of mathematicians, her eyesight was naturally not something that Amy could compare with. Although she still didn't understand the concept of the decimal system very well in some aspects, Meg's explanation was enough for her to see that this system was extraordinary. Coupled with the highly regular multiplication table, she saw endless possibilities. Luna looked at Meg, who had put down his pen, and said seriously, "Mr. Meg, although I'm not sure if this system and the decimal system of yours can be used in all situations, I can't deny that you are a genius." "I'm not a genius. I just know a little more." Meg shook his head with a smile. This was the wisdom of the wise men of the past. It was a clash of the top and bottom for this world. He wasn't sure what kind of impact this piece of paper would have on this world. "I'll get someone to send this information to Rodu as soon as possible. I don't have the ability to evaluate its value, nor can I verify it completely. However, I can be sure that this will definitely cause a huge uproar in the field of arithmetic on the Norland continent. The name Mamie will not be forgotten." Luna felt more and more that Meg was humble and polite. Not only was he a good cook, but he was also a genius in arithmetic. Even for such a discovery, he had to add Amy's name to it. It could be said that he doted on his daughter to the extreme. This man is really interesting and curious. Is there anything that he can't do? Amy looked at Meg with her eyes shining. Even Teacher Luna said that Father was a genius. Father was indeed amazing. Meg nodded with a smile. Anyway, there shouldn't be any concept of royalties or invention patents in this world. He didn't want to make money from this. He would just treat it as an awesome advertisement for his restaurant. Of course, the purpose of his visit today was not to teach Amy the multiplication table. His main purpose was to find a magic teacher for her. So, he got down to business. "Miss Luna, I brought Amy here today not only because she wants to see you, but also because I want to ask if the magic teachers in Chaos School will accept paid private lessons. Amy is very interested in magic, but she's not old enough to enter the school yet. So, I want to find a teacher to teach her some basic magic knowledge in advance. I'm afraid that's not possible. The teachers in Chaos School can't teach outside for paid lessons. If the school finds out, their teaching license will be revoked." Luna shook her head awkwardly. She looked at Amy and said, "Also, Amy can't officially enter the school until next year. Even after she enters the school, she will have to wait until she's a little older before she has the opportunity to learn magic knowledge. After the professional magic teachers in the school confirm that she has magic talent, they will specially gather together to teach her." She didn't expect that just because Amy wanted to learn magic, Meg would personally come here to find a private teacher. "I see. All right, thank you, Miss Luna, for clearing my doubts." Meg was a little disappointed to hear that. However, this was a rule, so there was nothing he could do. His original plan had fallen through. It seemed that he had to think of another way. Luna looked at Amy with a smile and said, "Actually, Amy is still young. There's no need to rush to learn magic. It's quite boring." Amy shook her head and said, "Teacher Luna, I really like magic. I think it's super interesting." Meg and Amy played in Luna's office for a while before leaving. When they walked out of the school gate, the old guard and the orc both stared at them with wide eyes. They didn't know when the father and daughter had entered the school. "I have to send it to grandfather as soon as possible. Perhaps this will be an important turning point in promoting arithmetic on a large scale. Grandfather will definitely be interested in it." Luna looked at Meg's back from the office window, and she couldn't hide the excitement on her face. She quickly walked to the table, picked up the 2 pieces of paper, and put them away carefully before walking out. "Father, are we going home now?" Amy asked as she held one of Meg's fingers and looked up at Meg. She was in a very good mood today. Her singing had been praised by everyone, and she had even beaten Parmer with the multiplication table that her father had taught her. She felt as if she wasn't inferior to them at all. No. Since we're out, let's have a good day. We'll have lunch outside. Meg shook his head. It was indeed a little boring to stay in the restaurant every day. It was lunchtime now, so he took Amy to a popular barbecue restaurant on the side of the road. He was going to try out the dishes of this popular restaurant in this world. Ugly Duckling was sleeping in the basket, and Meg had covered it with a towel. No one would know what was in the basket if it didn't make a sound. As soon as they walked in, the aroma of barbecue wafted toward them. However, Meg couldn't help but furrow his brows. The aroma was mixed with the rank odor of mutton. Furthermore, the aroma of spices was too pungent. It was a smell even more intense than pepper. "Father, are we going to eat barbecue?" Amy's eyes lit up. She had never eaten barbecue before. Yes. Meg, who had been a little hesitant about whether to leave or not, nodded when he saw Amy's eagerness. He picked a seat by the window and sat down. This barbecue restaurant was one of the most popular in the Aden Square. It was only slightly less popular than Friar's Tavern. People usually had to wait in line to eat their barbecue at night. Even at noon, the restaurant with more than 20 tables was almost full. Meg glanced at the plate in front of the customer at the table next to him. The mutton had been cut into pieces. It was dark in color, and there was a layer of blackened sauce and seasoning powder on the surface. The two customers were eating the beef on their plates, chatting and laughing happily. It seemed that they were quite satisfied with the food. The sauce is not even applied evenly at all. The seasoning powder is not at the right time. The charcoal temperature is too high, and the barbecue time is too long. Is this barbecue skill at the level of an assistant chef? With just one look, Meg already couldn't help but want to complain. Phew. Hold it in. Smile. You're a restaurant owner now. If you get recognized for complaining, you'll be seen as a troublemaker. Meg slowly calmed himself down. Then, he opened the menu and ordered 2 servings of the restaurant's specialty barbecue mutton and beef. The price of one serving was 88 copper coins. It was the most expensive item on the menu. Chapter 101. The 2 portions of roast meat Meg ordered were quickly served, and the waiter even gave them a pot of tea for free. "Father, can we start now?" Amy's eyes lit up as she looked at the roast lamb chop in front of her. "Go ahead. Be careful, it's hot." Meg nodded with a smile as he looked at the plate of sliced roast steak in front of him. The roast steak was a bit between a kebab and a Western roast steak. It was called a kebab, but it wasn't skewered with bamboo skewers. It was called a steak, but it was cut open and roasted. The rank odor of the beef was slightly weaker, but the sauce was still very thick. The seasoning powder was sprinkled too early, and the surface of the meat was a little blackened after being roasted over the fire for too long. The smell of the seasoning powder was a little pungent. Meg was used to eating exquisite food, so his first impression of the roast beef was a little bad. Even when he occasionally went to roadside stalls to buy kebabs, they wouldn't serve such a thing to people. "Okay." Amy nodded. She picked up the fork on the table and picked up a piece of lamb chop with some difficulty. She brought it to her mouth and blew on it a few times. Then she opened her mouth and took a bite. She chewed happily, looking very cute. "Is it good?" Mag, who didn't have much of an appetite, asked with a smile as he looked at Amy, who was eating with relish. His interest was piqued. Amy nodded. After swallowing the meat in her mouth, she looked at Meg expectantly and asked, "Yes, it's not bad. But of course, it's not as good as Father's rainbow fried rice and rugiamo. But when will Father be able to cook roast meat?" "I'll learn in the future." Meg nodded with a smile. He was also looking forward to eating kebabs with Amy in his restaurant, but he didn't know when the system would release a recipe for roast meat. This was not something he could control. Maybe I can ask Amy to wait for the customers to come before we eat. Everything she eats is very delicious. She can taste the deliciousness of a pancake. This is more attractive than any yelling. Looking at Amy eating with relish, Meg thought to himself that he should try the new dish when it was released. There was nothing better than Amy's cooking. They had been out for the whole morning, so they were indeed a little hungry. Although the appearance was a little unsatisfactory, the way Amy ate still added a lot of points to the dish. At least, it gave Meg the desire to try it. He picked up a piece of steak and put it in his mouth. After chewing it a few times, his brows furrowed. The meat must have been roasted on the grill for a long time. In order to be ready to be served at any time, they did not consider the problem of the meat being roasted for too long and the problem of the meat being hard and dry. The taste of the sauce was a little hard to describe in a few words. It was hard to tell how many kinds of seasonings were used. Pepper, sugar, salt, ginger. The ratio was a little random. It was quite stimulating, but it also completely covered the original sweetness of the beef. One could only feel that one's mouth and tongue were a little numb from the stimulation of all kinds of seasonings. It could only be said that diners who liked strong flavors might like it more. They would give up on the pursuit of delicious taste and just enjoy the stimulation. If it were in his previous life, Meg would have immediately stood up to pay the bill and left after tasting it. However, looking at Amy, who was eating happily, he silently put down his fork. It was Amy's first time eating barbecued meat. Seeing how happy she was, how could he bear to spoil her mood? He picked up the tea on the table and poured her a cup and took a sip. This free tea made Meg's eyes light up. It had a slightly sweet and sour taste, a little like lemon juice. The color was clear with a little orange, similar to the color of honey water. Very quickly, the spiciness in his mouth was suppressed. He couldn't help but pour another cup and take a few sips. "What kind of water is this?" Meg asked the waiter passing by. "Sir, this is water made from lime fruit," the waiter replied with a smile. "Okay, thank you." Meg nodded. Although he didn't know what kind of fruit the lime fruit was, the water it was made from was indeed delicious. He could go in and take a look when he passed by a fruit shop later. Perhaps he could also serve the customer a cup of lime water. After all, after eating fried rice and meat, the customer's mouth was a little dry. There were even customers who asked him for plain water earlier. Host, the system solemnly reminds you that the restaurant is not allowed to sell any food other than the menu provided by the system, including drinks. The system's voice sounded in Meg's mind. "Who said I was going to sell it?" Meg smiled. "I was going to give it to you as a gift." A line of ellipses silently floated in Meg's mind. After a while, the system's roar sounded, "Host, your behavior is undoubtedly a serious provocation to the system. You are degrading the restaurant style. You are giving up on yourself. You are. System, do you sell higher-grade lime fruit?" Meg calmly interrupted. "Not for sale for now," the system said in a somewhat complicated tone after hearing the roar. "Then it's fine. You're not selling it, so why can't I buy it?" Meg curled his lips, but after thinking for a while, he said, "Forget it. I don't have the recipe or the experience bag anyway. I'll buy a few first and try them myself." He recalled that in his previous life, he had tried making lemon water on a whim at home several times. No matter if he added honey or sugar, the taste was indescribable. Meg felt that it was unlikely that he could develop a drinkable lime water by himself. After pouring a cup of water for Amy and eating 2 more steaks, Meg chose to give up. He would go home and make himself a plate of Yangzhou fried rice. Compared to Yangzhou fried rice, this steak tasted like wax. "Father, you're not eating anymore?" Amy asked curiously when she saw Meg's plate full. "Yes, I'm full." Meg nodded. "Then Amy can help Father finish the rest." Amy looked at the plate of steak in front of Meg with shining eyes. "Okay." Meg switched the two plates and looked at Amy dotingly. It was the little girl's first time eating barbecue, and she seemed to like it very much. This should represent the average level of barbecue in this world. She had some grilling skills and knew how to use all kinds of seasonings and sauces, but it was too rough and not delicate enough. "Father, today's barbecue is so delicious." "I didn't know barbecue tasted like this," Amy said happily after paying the bill and leaving. "Father will make you barbecue 100 times better than this in the future." Meg smiled and patted Amy's head. This level of barbecue couldn't even be considered as entry level. It had to be crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. With one bite, the rich sauce and tender beef would blend perfectly. It was delicious and chewy. Only then could it be considered a truly delicious beef kebab. At noon, the customers who waited outside Amy's for a long time and didn't hear a response from the door for a long time all left in disappointment. Today, they really saw Meg as a man of his word. He said he wouldn't open the door, and he really went out to have fun. They'd better not come over on their days off in the future. Meg took Amy and Ugly Duckling, who had just woken up, to play in the square for 2 hours. After the two little ones had played to their heart's content, he bought a few limes on the way, and took the two little ones home. Chapter 102. It was a girl who had collapsed at the door. She was wearing a gray linen shirt and trousers, and her left hand, which was resting on her head, was pointing in the direction of the restaurant. Her blonde hair was tied into a side ponytail, and only the side of her face could be seen. She looked very thin and frail, and the loose clothes made her look even more petite. "What's wrong with this big sister?" Amy looked at the girl worriedly, and Ugly Duckling meowed in her arms. "Why did she faint here?" Meg was also a little puzzled. He squatted down to test her. Her breathing was a little weak, but it was still normal. There were no obvious injuries on her body, so if it wasn't some kind of illness, then she most likely fainted from hunger. Furthermore, there was a pair of small golden horns on her head, which looked a little like antlers. She didn't seem to be an ordinary girl, but he didn't know if she was a demon or an orc. Elves didn't seem to have horns. Right at this moment, the girls suddenly murmured, "Roast. Roast goose, roast goose." "Father, she really is a little girl who sells matches. She's grown into a big sister." Amy's eyes lit up, and she looked at her with pity. "Let's help her. She's so pitiful, but Ugly Duckling is still young, meow, meow." Ugly Duckling seemed to have sensed that something was wrong, and it began to meow uneasily. "All right, then let's help her." Meg looked around. There weren't many passers-by here, so he didn't know how long this girl had been lying here. Furthermore, if she was picked up by someone with bad intentions, who knew what would happen to this thin and frail girl? He got up and opened the door, and placed the small basket on the table inside. He then reached out to help her up slowly, and walked into the restaurant. Meg found it a little difficult to carry Amy now, so he naturally couldn't carry her like a gentleman. Fortunately, this girl was very light, and he helped her slowly into the restaurant. He pulled out a chair for her to sit down, and leaned against the back of the chair. What a beautiful big sister. Amy's eyes lit up as she looked at the golden-haired girl. Meg was also a little surprised as he looked at the girl. Her facial features were delicate, and she looked to be only 17 or 18 years old. However, her two thin eyebrows were like two small, straight swords that were raised to both sides, adding a different kind of toughness to her originally gentle and beautiful face. However, her face was frighteningly pale, and her lips were a little dry. It was unknown how long she had not eaten or drunk anything. She was curled up in the chair, looking like a kitten, which made people feel sorry for her. Could it be a dragon? Meg looked at the pair of antlers on the girl's head. They looked a bit like dragon horns. He muttered to himself and walked to the kitchen. He poured a cup of warm water and slowly fed it to her, but she still didn't wake up. "Father, is this big sister all right?" Amy asked worriedly as she looked at Meg. "She should be hungry. I'll go make her a plate of rainbow fried rice. She can eat it when she wakes up." Meg nodded. If she didn't wake up, he might have to cook porridge to feed her. "Yes, yes. Father, you're so good. Meg wants to be a good person like you." Amy looked at Meg with admiration on her little face. "Yes, we have to be kind and help as much as we can. However, the most important thing is to ensure our own safety. We can't force ourselves." Meg looked at Amy and nodded with a smile. "I understand." Amy nodded seriously. Meg went into the kitchen to make the fried rice. Amy sat opposite the golden-haired girl with Ugly Duckling in her arms, looking at her worriedly. Ugly Duckling stretched out its little paws and scratched the edge of the table, making a soft rustling sound. The golden-haired girl, who was half curled up in the chair, gradually calmed down after drinking some water. She frowned as if she wanted to wake up, but she seemed to lack the motivation to do so, and still didn't wake up. An alluring aroma slowly wafted out of the half-open kitchen. Ugly Duckling, who was nestled in Amy's arms, stopped scratching the edge of the table, and stuck its little head out to look in the direction of the kitchen. Its big blue eyes were full of desire. "Don't look. It's not for you anyway," Amy said calmly. "Meow, meow." Ugly Duckling was instantly disheartened. It meowed a few times in annoyance before snuggling back into Amy's arms and closing its eyes. Out of sight, out of mind. As the alluring aroma of the fried rice wafted out, the golden-haired girl's nose twitched slightly, and her eyelids trembled as if she were struggling to open her eyes. "Father, this big sister seems to be waking up." Amy looked at the golden-haired girl, and rushed into the kitchen with excitement. Yabamiya seemed to have been startled by Amy's voice, and she slowly opened her eyes. Her left eye was golden, while her right eye was black. Her pupils slowly focused, and she was greeted by the sight of an exquisitely decorated and luxurious restaurant. There were beautiful murals, beautiful chandeliers, clean and bright dining tables, and an adorable half-elf girl sitting across from her, holding an orange kitten in her arms. Where am I? Am I dreaming? Yabamiya was a little dazed. She only remembered that she was in a daze from hunger, and before she fainted, she saw a beautiful restaurant. It was like a palace, a restaurant that shouldn't have appeared in the Aiden Square. After that, she lost consciousness. Now that she opened her eyes, she was sitting in that restaurant. Everything around her was so beautiful, and even the half-elf girl sitting across from her was so beautiful and adorable. The orange kitten in her arms was so furry and adorable. She had to be dreaming. What made her even more concerned was the alluring fragrance floating in the air. What kind of delicious food could emit such a fragrance? Her stomach was growling, and she couldn't help but swallow her saliva. With some effort, she looked in the direction of the kitchen. A tall, thin, and handsome uncle was walking towards her with a plate of brightly colored food. There was a kind smile on his face. She didn't think that she would be able to have such a beautiful dream before she starved to death. Of course, Yabamiya's attention was completely drawn to the alluring aroma wafting from the plate of food. All types of colorful ingredients had been sliced into even pieces, and it was as if a rainbow had been plucked from the sky before being stir-fried. The most prominent aroma was the egg aroma, and all of the other aromas mixed together to create a harmonious and alluring aroma. Dig in. Meg gently placed the plate in front of Yabamiya with a smile. Even though this girl was still a little dazed, it was a good thing that she was awake. At the very least, she could eat on her own. Her gold and black eyes also surprised him a little. It was a very rare color for her eyes. Thank you. Even though she felt like she was dreaming, Yabamiya still thanked him politely before scooping up a spoonful of fried rice from the center of the plate. The golden eggs were perfectly wrapped around the grains of rice. Every ingredient was cut into the exact same size, and the surface was glistening with a little bit of oil. Was he going to stir-fry so many ingredients together? She had never seen such a cooking method before. Chapter 103. The egg melted almost immediately in her mouth, and the soft ham melted into the rice. There was also the taste of shrimp. All kinds of flavors were contained in this bite. The flavors of all the ingredients melted in her mouth and assaulted her taste buds. Even after she swallowed, the fragrance of the rice still lingered in her mouth. After swallowing it, the delicious taste turned into a warm current that slowly flowed through her body. Her entire body was nourished, and every part of her flesh and blood was cheering, making her feel much better all of a sudden. How can there be such delicious food in this world? No, it can only be found in dreams. But it's really delicious. Yabamiya's eyes were wide open. One spoonful was not enough. She couldn't help but take another big spoonful. Feeling the delicious taste in her mouth, she felt as if she was soaking in a hot spring, dispelling the cold and hunger. Spoonful after spoonful, she couldn't stop. Poor little sister. Even if she grows up, she won't be able to sell a single match. Amy looked at Yabamiya with pity and sighed in her heart. Although she didn't get to eat the roast goose, she should be very happy to eat the delicious rainbow fried rice made by her father. How long has she been hungry? Meg couldn't help but smile as he watched Yabamiya devour the fried rice like a tornado. A giant dragon shouldn't be so miserable. If she's not an orc, she's most likely a half-dragon. Mag thought to himself, she's a half-dragon. Mag nodded. The situation of being half-dragon was somewhat awkward. Although this girl was quite beautiful, the chances of her not being able to find a job were quite high. After all, most shop owners didn't want to attract unnecessary trouble because of a half-dragon. Ding! The spoon fell on the empty plate and made a soft sound. Yabamiya was stunned for a moment. Only then did she realize that she had finished the plate of fried rice. Looking at the few grains of rice left on the plate, she couldn't help but pick up the plate and lick it. Then she put down the plate with satisfaction. A warm and comfortable feeling permeated his entire body, and the fragrance of the rice still lingered in his mouth. His spirit, which had been dispirited due to hunger, had now completely recovered, and his hunger had also been dispelled. And this was all because of the delicious fried rice just now. Are all the things I eat in my dreams so magical? Then I hope I never wake up from this dream. Yabamiya said to herself happily. She then looked up at Meg and smiled. Uncle, I want another serving of that delicious food. What a cute little elf. Let big sister pinch you. He then stroked Amy's face and stroked Ugly Duckling's head. And you're such a cute kitten. You're so much cuter than the black and white cats outside. Do you still think you're dreaming? Meg stared blankly for a moment and couldn't help but smile. However, after eating a plate of Yangzhou fried rice, the girl's face regained some color. When she smiled, her two small canine teeth were exposed. She was quite bright and lovely. Amy shook her head earnestly at the sight of Yabamiya's smiling face, and pointed behind her as she said, Big sister, even though it's daytime right now, you're not dreaming. If you don't believe me, look out the window. That's the Aiden Square. Meow. Ugly Duckling was a little unhappy that someone other than Amy was stroking its head, and it curled up in Amy's arms. It's not a dream. Yabamiya's hand instantly froze. She looked up at Meg, then at the innocent Amy, and then at the slightly hostile little orange kitten. The air seemed to have frozen in that instant. The awkward silence lasted for a long while. Yabamiya slowly turned around and looked behind her. Outside the transparent glass window was the Aiden Square under the sunlight. An old man was doing exercises in the square with a long sword in his hand. 2 pigeons flew down and were looking for insects to eat. Everything was so simple and real. It's really not a dream. Yabamiya's neck was a little stiff as she turned around. She looked at the plate in front of her, which had been licked to the point where she could see her own reflection. Her face reddened as she suddenly stood up from her chair. She lowered her head uneasily and wrung her hands, not knowing where to place them. She said with embarrassment, I'm sorry. I thought I was dreaming. It's okay, big sister. When I first ate Father's rainbow fried rice, I also felt like I was dreaming because it was so delicious. Amy shook her head and comforted her. But I didn't expect you to still be like this when you've grown up. Meg looked at Yabamiya, who was a little embarrassed and wanted to find a hole to hide in. He smiled gently and said, It's okay. What's your name? You haven't eaten in a long time, right? I saw you passed out in front of the restaurant, so I helped you in. It's good to see that you're fine. I'm the owner of this restaurant. You can call me Mr. Mac. Hearing Amy and Meg's comforting words and seeing the gentle smile on Meg's face, Yabamiya's panicked heart calmed down a little. This father and daughter pair seemed to be good people. However, when she thought about her situation, her expression became a little sad. She nodded and said, My name is Yabamiya. I haven't eaten in 3 days. The owner of the restaurant kicked me out and didn't pay me. I've been looking for a job in the Aiden Square for 3 days, but because I'm a half-dragon, no one hired me to do the dishes. When I walked in front of your restaurant today, I thought I was dreaming. How could there be such a beautiful restaurant in this world? Then I fainted. You're a half-dragon. Meg raised his eyebrows. He didn't understand how the races in this world had evolved. They didn't even have reproductive isolation. Furthermore, wasn't there a huge difference between giant dragons and humans? If it were a combination of giant dragons and forest trolls, then perhaps he could try to understand. However, from Yabamiya's story, it was quite clear that it wasn't easy for half-dragons to survive in this world. Even though half of her dragon bloodline ran through her veins, she couldn't even find a job as a dishwasher. As a result, she almost starved to death. However, if she was a waitress, she's so pitiful. Amy looked at Yabamiya with a pitiful expression. She then turned to Meg and asked, Father, didn't you say that we need a waitress at our restaurant this morning? Can't we just ask Big Sister Mia to stay? Do you need a waitress at your restaurant? Yabamiya's eyes immediately lit up upon hearing this. However, she then looked down at the lavish decor of the restaurant, and a dejected look appeared on her face. Even those lowly restaurants didn't want her. This restaurant was so high-end, how could it possibly accept a half-dragon as a waitress? Chapter 104. Yes, I need a waitress, but I haven't found anyone yet. You said you've worked in a restaurant before. Meg nodded with a smile. What Amy said was exactly what he was thinking, but he didn't directly agree to let Yabamiya stay. The restaurant didn't need a vase, and it didn't need extra staff. Yes, I've been helping out in the kitchen with my mother since I was 9 years old. My mother passed away when I was 12, and I've been helping out in the kitchen since then. Until a few days ago. Yabamiya nodded. She was a little nervous and excited when she heard Meg's question, but her expression gradually became gloomy, as if there was something she couldn't say. Then you have a lot of experience. But the waitress I'm hiring now may have a lot of work to do. Her main job is to receive customers, take orders, serve dishes, clean the table, and clean the restaurant. It will be very busy during opening hours. Are you sure you can do it? Meg didn't ask any more questions. He looked into Yabamiya's eyes and asked. Receive customers. A trace of panic flashed across Yabamiya's face, but there was also a trace of expectation. For so many years, she had been hiding in the kitchen like an invisible person. Once, the chef asked her to serve a dish to a customer. She carefully served the dish, but when the owner saw it, he was so angry that he smashed a hole in her head with a spoon, causing her to bleed profusely. She was only 13 years old at that time. Since then, she had never dared to step out of the kitchen during opening hours. She also wanted to wear clean and beautiful clothes and serve the customers plates of delicacies with a smile on her face. She also wanted to clean up the table under the admiring gazes of the customers. However, these things were impossible for a half-dragon like her. No restaurant would hire a half-dragon as a waitress. I've never cooked before. And if I serve dishes, the customers may be unhappy. Yabamiya said without confidence. If you're worried that the customers will be unhappy because of your identity, that's not a problem in my restaurant. Amy's back is the symbol of my restaurant. She is my greatest pride. In my eyes, your race is no different from Amy's, and you won't be a burden to the restaurant, Meg said with a smile, taking a bag of Rigiamo from the side and gently putting it on the table. Seeing the girl's self-abasement, Meg was suddenly reminded of Amy from a few days ago. However, Yabamiya had been through a lot more, so she was hurt more deeply, which made him feel some compassion for her. Yabamiya stared at Meg with her mouth slightly agape. This was the first time she had heard something like this. It was the first time someone had told her that being a half-dragon was not a problem. His gaze then fell upon the bag on the table, and he discovered that it was the back of a half-elf little girl. It was none other than the adorable little girl sitting across from him. Meg was using this as the restaurant's logo. How bold and risky was that? 2 years ago, in the Aiden Square, a drunken demon smashed up a restaurant because there was a half-orc waiter there. The owner was beaten to a pulp, and died not long after. The restaurant's business was booming, and it closed down completely just like that. Although the demon was later punished by the Grey Temple and was still in prison, the culprit was the half-orc waitress. Almost overnight, all of the half-human waitresses in the Aiden Square lost their jobs. Even the kitchen helper like her had her salary cut in half, and she didn't even have enough to cover her daily expenses. However, Meg was using the back of a half-elf as the restaurant's logo, and now he was saying that he didn't care about her identity. This made her feel the love Meg had for Amy, as well as the respect he had for half-humans. To them, treating everyone equally was even more precious than pity. What I want to test is whether you have the ability to do this job, and whether you have the courage to try, Meg continued. Yabamiya hesitated momentarily before mustering her courage, and nodding as she said, if possible, I want to give it a try. That's more like it. Father is very easy to talk to, so don't be scared, big sister Mia. Amy held on to Ugly Duckling's little paw with an expectant look on her little face. If big sister Mia worked at the restaurant, then she would have someone to play with in the future. Yes, yes. Yabamiya nodded. This was the first time that someone had encouraged her after her mother passed away, and she felt a sense of warmth in her heart. Very good. A smile also appeared on Meg's face. He didn't want to give her a job out of charity. Instead, he wanted her to fight for a job that she could do with dignity. That would make her happier and more confident. Then let's begin. Due to the fact that there will be a lot of customers during the restaurant's opening hours, in order to increase efficiency, we have to take orders and serve the dishes quickly. The basic requirement is to remember each and every customer's order and request. Of course, if you're literate, you can write it down in a notebook, but I want you to take as little time as possible, Meg said as he looked at Yabamiya. Yabamiya thought for a moment before nodding and said, "My mother taught me to read when I was a child, and I have a pretty good memory. If it's just remembering the order of each customer's order, then it shouldn't be a problem." "Alright, let's give it a try." Meg didn't expect her to be so confident, but he didn't rush to make a decision. He walked to the counter, took out a small notebook and a pen, and put them aside. He took 4 pieces of paper, tore them into 16 pieces, and marked them with a serial number. Then, he wrote down 2 or 3 customers' requests on each piece of paper, and placed the 16 pieces of paper on the 16 tables in a messy order. The first table at the entrance is table number 1, and the other tables are table number 2, table number 3. The serial number on the paper is the order of the order, and each customer's request is written on it. You have 10 minutes to memorize these things, whether you write them down or memorize them in a notebook. Meg looked at the clock on the wall and said, "Begin." Yabamiya looked at the paper money on the table next to her, and walked to table number 1 empty-handed without any hesitation. "It's done." 5 minutes later, Yabamiya stood in front of Meg, and her eyes were filled with confidence. "Then tell me the order of the order." Meg was a little surprised, but he didn't take the paper. His shorthand skills had won him the first prize in a contest in junior high, so naturally, he could remember everything he wrote down clearly. 2 rugiamos for table 3. Yabamiya looked at Meg and listed the orders one by one unhurriedly. She paused for a moment, but then she went on and finished all the orders fluently. Table 3 ordered 2 rugiamos. "Father, is everything correct?" Amy asked curiously as she looked at Meg. Chapter 105. Yes, the order and order were all correct. Both the efficiency and accuracy are very good. Meg nodded with a smile. Yabamiya's performance had indeed surprised him, but at the same time, he was very satisfied. This was the kind of employee he wanted. "Sister Mia is so amazing." Amy clapped her little hands and looked at Yabamiya with admiration. "No. I'm not amazing." Yabamiya quickly waved her hands, but her slightly red face was full of joy. She had a good memory since she was young, but she had always been ridiculed by the kitchen staff for being useless. She didn't expect to be worshipped by Amy and praised by Meg today. This feeling of being praised and appreciated was something she had never experienced before, and it gave her some confidence in herself. Other than memory, high-intensity work also requires good physical strength. Otherwise, you won't be able to finish a day's work. Can you do it? Meg looked at Yabamiya's small body under the loose clothes. When he helped her in, she probably weighed less than 40 kilograms. "Of course I can." Yabamiya suddenly puffed out her chest and pushed the loose clothes up. Unexpectedly, she was quite big. However, she quickly realized that her actions were a little unsightly, so she quickly relaxed and nodded with a red face. "Although I look a little skinny, I'm very strong. When I was in the kitchen, I could move a piece of pork by myself. I could work from morning to night. My physical strength is better than the men who help me in the kitchen." Meg pointed at the log table in front of him and said, "Then, try this table." The table was made of thick wood and weighed at least 100 kilograms. It was a little difficult for him to move it. Like this. Yabamiya walked over and grabbed the edge of the table with both hands. The wooden table was lifted 20 centimeters off the ground. She looked at Meg with a relaxed expression. Meg raised his eyebrows. This girl looked thin and weak, but her strength was amazing. It was much harder to lift a table by grabbing the edge of the table than it was to lift 100 kilograms. He nodded and said, "It's done." It seemed that her small body was caused by not eating enough for a long time. As long as she had enough nutrition, her plasticity would be good. "Wow! Sister Mia, you're so strong," Amy praised as she watched Yabamia put the table back in its original position. Yabamia smiled a little embarrassedly. She was a little unhappy with the nickname of Super Strength Girl in the kitchen. She didn't expect Amy to like it so much. Meg looked at Yabamia with satisfaction. He had a good memory and good stamina. He was very close to the ideal employee. He looked at Yabamia, who was still a little restrained, and said with a smile, "I hope to bring a comfortable dining experience to most of the customers. The philosophy of the restaurant is kindness, distance, equality." There was no need to be respectful to every guest, but at the same time keeping a distance, being able to put on a kind smile would make the guests feel comfortable, and treating every guest equally was the most basic respect. "Now, can you please give me a sincere smile? Kindness, distance, equality." Yabamia, who was a little nervous, fell into deep thought after hearing Meg's words. Equality was something she had never come into contact with before. Ever since she was born, she had been living in an unequal environment. The previous restaurant served the elves first, then the demons and trolls, and finally the humans. As for the half-races, they were directly rejected. There was no equality at all. However, Mag had said that he was going to treat all of his customers equally, and that should include half-breeds like her. If she could serve half-breeds in his restaurant, it would be a wonderful experience. With that in mind, a smile appeared on Yabamia's face. She was like a little white flower blooming on the dry ground in winter. It wasn't beautiful, but it was very clean, and it seemed to purify one's soul. "If you're willing, I think you can come to work tomorrow." Meg looked at Yabamia and said seriously. Her smile, which revealed a pair of small canine teeth, was delicate and cute. Most importantly, it was very infectious. Just looking at it would make one's mood better. This was a very special talent. Meg didn't think it was necessary for her to keep a distance from the customers. It was quite good like this. "Really?" Yabamia's face was filled with disbelief. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. "Yes, of course. As for your salary, the first month will be considered as a probationary period. It will be 4,500 copper coins. The restaurant will include lunch, but breakfast and dinner are not included. At the same time, it won't include accommodation. I know you're in a difficult situation, so I'll give you half a month's salary in advance to let you rent a room and have your meals." Meg nodded. He looked at Yabamia's clothes, which were stained with oil and patched up. After a moment of silence, he nodded and said, "The restaurant will also provide 2 sets of work clothes. I'll give them to you later." This. Yabamia's mouth was wide open. She suddenly felt dizzy from happiness. All she did was memorize a few pieces of paper, move the table, and smile, and she was hired by Meg. She was even offered a salary of 4,500 copper coins. When she worked in the previous restaurant, she only received 800 copper coins a month, and it didn't include accommodation or food. "System, show me the female clothing list. I want to get a set of work clothes for the new employee," Meg said in his mind. The system is a legitimate system. It doesn't provide female clothing. The system said seriously. "I'll buy 2 sets of clothes and 2 pairs of shoes. I'll pay cash." Meg didn't beat around the bush. Chapter 106. The designs provided by the system were indeed very complete. They could basically satisfy all the occasions and uses. Meg roughly went through them and chose a long black and white maid costume, which was a little similar to a blue and white maid costume. The system directly stole Reem's picture. She wore a white tube top and an apron, a black bra and skirt that revealed her delicate collarbones. There was a white bow tied around her neck, a white hair band on her head, and a black hair band on her head. 5 pairs of black and white stockings were included as a bonus. As for shoes, Meg chose 2 pairs of leather flats, one black and one white. They were simple in design, but they should be more comfortable. After all, he was so busy working in the restaurant. After 8 hours of work, wearing high heels would probably break his feet. Total 11 gold coins. You can start customizing after payment. Estimated time to complete is 5 minutes, the system said. That's it. Pay. Meg was quite satisfied with his taste. These 2 maid outfits were actually quite conservative. It was a bit of his bad taste. He wouldn't be able to see them outside his restaurant. Payment complete. Data collection complete. Processing in progress. It will be delivered in 5 minutes, the system replied. Sister Mia, you're not dreaming. It really is the Aiden Square outside. Amy looked at Yabamiya, who was still in a daze. She was also quite happy to hear Meg's words. Yabamiya came back to her senses. She looked at Meg and shook her head. I think the salary is too high. I can't accept so much. My previous job only paid 800 a month. You only need to pay me 800. I'll work very hard. No, you're worth it. Besides, our restaurant's target audience is middle to high income people. What we need is for you to show enthusiasm and work standards that are worth this salary. Meg shook his head with a smile. He flipped open the menu on the table. Your lunch is a plate of Yangzhou fried rice. Of course, you can choose 2 plates of Laji Rujiamo for lunch. When the restaurant releases new dishes, you can also choose any dish that costs less than 600 copper coins. 600 copper coins. Yabamiya's eyes widened as she looked at the price on the menu. A plate of Yangzhou fried rice costs 600 copper coins. If she guessed correctly, this was the delicious food she had just eaten. If that delicious food had to be measured by money, then 600 copper coins was not expensive at all. It was just that she didn't have the money. Now that Meg said he would provide her with a plate of fried rice for lunch every day, or she could exchange it for other dishes of the same price in the restaurant. This employee benefit was many times higher than her salary. Alright, let's not talk about the salary. This is only for the probation period. If you're efficient this month, I'll consider your salary. Meg gestured for Yabamiya to sit down. Yabamiya. The starting salary for a second-class waitress was 4,500 copper coins, and the average salary was about 5,000 copper coins. With Yabamiya's appearance, she could definitely be a first-class waitress. Now, Meg was using a first-class waitress to do the work of a third-class waitress, and paying a second-class waitress the same salary. Yabamiya was not losing out. However, because of her identity as a half-dragon, no restaurant would hire Yabamiya even if she received a third-class waitress salary. Otherwise, she would not have fainted in front of the restaurant. Therefore, Yabamiya was not an exploitative capitalist. As for the fact that the benefits were only for lunch, that was because the cost of ingredients was too high. The cost of ingredients for a plate of Yangzhou fried rice was almost 300 copper coins, which was even higher than her salary. She might as well ask Mag to do some extra work for her. There was an empty room on the second floor, but Meg did not like other people living in his house. Since she was an employee, he should keep a certain distance from her. Therefore, he paid her in advance and let her rent a room outside. When Yabamiya took the cup of water from Meg, she was still in a daze. After waking up, she, who had always been unlucky, was hit by happiness. She could eat delicious food, be recognized, and now, she even had a job. Moreover, it was the job that she wanted the most, which allowed her to have direct contact with customers. Most importantly, her monthly salary was 4,500 copper coins. And she could eat delicious food for lunch. The happiness came too suddenly, and she was still in a daze. Meg was not in a hurry to guide her. It always took some time to adapt to the changes in her life. When he heard the system's notification that the clothes had arrived, he went upstairs and took the clothes and shoes that the system had packed in 3 bags. He also asked the system to print 2 pictures of maids. After all, there were no such clothes in this world, and it would be embarrassing if she did not know how to wear them. He was not in a good position to teach her. These are your work clothes. You can change into them before you go to work tomorrow. Here are 25 gold coins. Find a safe and comfortable place to live. The rest should be enough for your normal expenses this month. The rest of your salary will be paid on the 1st of next month. Meg put the bags on the table and handed a handful of gold coins to Yabamiya. Thank you, boss. I will work hard. Yabamiya took the gold coins with both hands. Her eyes were moist. It was the first time in many years that she had been recognized and cared for like this. It was not because he pitied her, nor was it because he coveted her body. It was because he recognized her ability and felt that she was qualified for this job. This feeling of trust made her feel that she was not so bad after all. At least there was still work that she could do. Then I will call you Mia. I hope to see your smiling face tomorrow and in the future. You look really good when you smile. Meg nodded with a smile. Go. It will be difficult to find a room when it gets dark. Good luck, Sister Mia. See you tomorrow. Amy also waved her little hand. See you. Yabamiya nodded. She took the 3 bags on the table and looked at Meg and Amy with gratitude. She turned and walked towards the door. She was curious and looked forward to what kind of clothes were in the bags. The clothes she was wearing were left behind by her mother. Father, does this mean that Sister Mia doesn't have to continue selling matches anymore? Amy asked. Yes. She will be a member of our restaurant from now on. Meg nodded with a smile. It seemed that she and Amy could get along well. With the waitress problem solved, Meg also felt a lot more relaxed. The system's prompt to install the shutters rang in his mind. He confirmed the installation and took Amy upstairs to take a shower. When they came downstairs, the shutters were already installed. It was almost time for dinner. He lowered the shutters and turned on the crystal chandelier to block all the prying eyes. The system's products were really amazing. During dinner, there were several knocks on the door. Meg ignored them. After a while, there was silence. The persuasion effect was quite good. Chapter 107. Meg looked at Yabamiya, who was pouting with her left leg raised. She was acting cute while facing the window. Meg was stunned for a moment before he couldn't help but laugh. She was actually quite cute. Yabamiya had changed into a black and white maid outfit. The custom-made maid outfit fit her perfectly. Her limbs were slender, and her breasts were large. The waistcoat perfectly accentuated her figure. She wore a white headband on her head, and her long blonde hair was tied into a side ponytail, hanging on her right side. She wore black knee-length socks and black leather shoes. Her current appearance, coupled with the smile on her face, made her look like a young girl full of vitality. Yabamiya was stunned for a moment. She quickly retracted her arms and legs and stood at attention. Her face was red, and she looked up at the sky. What should I do? Why did I suddenly become transparent? And the boss saw me. This is so embarrassing. Mia, why are you here so early? Come in. Meg opened the door with a smile. He didn't expect Yabamiya to come so early. He didn't tell her what time to come yesterday. Good morning, Mr. Mack. When I left yesterday, I saw the sign on the door saying that the restaurant opens at 7:30 a.m., so I thought you would wake up early to prepare. That's why I came early to help. Yabamiya walked over. Although her face was still a little red, her expression and attitude were quite serious when she spoke to Meg. After she finished speaking, she added, I ate early on the way here. Okay. You don't have to come so early next time. You don't need to help in the kitchen. Just come before the restaurant opens. Meg shook his head with a smile. He moved aside to let Yabamiya in. This girl was quite attentive. He was quite satisfied with her attitude towards work. I've been helping in the kitchen for many years. If you need me to prepare ingredients, I can do a lot of things. Washing vegetables, cutting vegetables, cleaning the kitchen. I can do all of that, Yabamiya said enthusiastically. Compared to receiving customers, she was more familiar with these things. Your job scope doesn't include this, and you might not be able to handle my cooking. When I need your help in the future, I'll naturally let you know. Meg smiled and shook his head. The food supply system had already taken care of everything, and there were no ingredients that he couldn't handle. As for cutting the vegetables, it wasn't something that Yabamiya could handle. However, this girl was quite enthusiastic about her work. Meg poured a glass of water for Yabamiya and said with a smile, take a seat and rest for a while. Amy isn't awake yet, so I'll go prepare the ingredients. It's your first day at work, so you should get used to the pace of work. Don't get frustrated even if you make a few mistakes. Just do your best. It'll be very busy when we open for business, so enjoy some leisure time. Oh. Yabamiya held the warm blanket in her hands, and her heart was also filled with warmth. Her previous boss had ordered her around like a donkey, and she barely had any time to rest. However, Mr. Mack didn't allow her to do anything other than what she had agreed to do. She could tell from his attitude and tone that he treated her as an equal. She hesitated for a moment before sitting down obediently. As she looked around the beautiful restaurant, she thought to herself, 600 copper coins for a set of delicacies. Everything from the preparation of ingredients to the cooking must be very meticulous. I'd better not go and cause trouble for Mr. Mack. Meg skillfully kneaded the dough and cooked the meat. He turned around to look at Yabamiya, who was sitting obediently in the restaurant, and nodded with satisfaction. She's pretty, obedient, doesn't talk much, works hard, and has a good attitude. It's not easy to find an employee like her. I've found a treasure this time. At around 7 a.m., Amy changed her clothes and washed up before coming downstairs with Ugly Duckling in her arms. She stood at the entrance of the kitchen and looked at Meg as she rubbed her eyes, and said, Good morning, Father. Good morning, Amy. Meg smiled. Looking at the flower on his hands, he walked over and kissed her hair on her forehead. He pointed outside, and said, Mia is here too. Go and play with her for a while. I'll make breakfast. Okay. Amy nodded. Then she said, But Father, I'll wait for Half-Beard Grandpa to come to eat my Yangzhou fried rice this morning. He said he'll treat me to something delicious. I just want to have a Rujiamo first. Okay. Meg nodded with a smile. When Crassus didn't come to the restaurant the day before yesterday, the little one had nagged him several times. She wanted him to fulfill his promise. Good morning, big sister Mia. Amy turned around with Ugly Duckling in her arms. When she saw Yabamiya, her eyes lit up. Wow, big sister Mia is so beautiful today. Your new clothes are so beautiful. A smile appeared on Yabamiya's face upon hearing Amy's praise. However, she was also a little shy. She looked at Amy and said, Amy is also very beautiful. She's prettier than me. Amy thought for a moment before nodding seriously. Yes, I think so too. She climbed onto a chair and sat down across from Yabamiya. Meow, Ugly Duckling looked at Yabamiya with a cautious and curious expression. It was a little unhappy that this little guy had touched its head the day before, but it was quite pleasing to the eye today. Is this a kitten? Yabamiya asked curiously. This was the first time that she had seen a kitten of this color. Amy shook her head. No, it's actually a duckling. It's so ugly, so I call it Ugly Duckling. It'll become a swan when it grows up. A duckling that'll become a swan. Yabamiya looked at the kitten in Amy's arms, and she was momentarily stunned. Yes, I'm waiting for it to grow up. Amy nodded. She thought back to what Mia had said when she was unconscious the day before. I think you'll like it too. It's very cute. Yabamiya looked at Ugly Duckling with a hesitant expression. Can I hold it? Of course, but we have to ask Ugly Duckling if it agrees. Amy nodded and looked down at Ugly Duckling. Ugly Duckling covered its eyes with one paw, and raised its other paw in front of itself in an ugly gesture of rejection. Looks like it doesn't want you to hold it yet. Amy shrugged with resignation. It's an interesting little guy. Yabamiya withdrew her hand without feeling dejected. The aroma of braised meat drifted out of the kitchen, and she couldn't help but take a deep breath of the rich aroma. It was different from the Yangzhou fried rice. It should be the La Ji Rujiamo that cost 300 copper coins on the menu. She was curious and expectant. Let's eat. Meg came out of the kitchen with a plate of Yangzhou fried rice and 2 rujiamos. He handed one of the rujiamos to Amy, sat down beside her, and began to eat. First thing in the morning was a plate of Yangzhou fried rice. The rice from the spring of life could restore one's body to its best state. Then a rujiamo would make one's blood boil, and the tiredness of the morning would disappear completely. Yabamiya looked at the rujiamo in Amy's hand, and swallowed involuntarily when she smelled the rich aroma of the meat. Sister Mia, do you want to know what a rujiamo tastes like? Amy looked at the rujiamo in her hand, and then at Yabamiya. Yabamiya nodded without thinking. Her body was honest. But was Amy going to let her try it? Should she eat it? She suddenly felt a little conflicted. Chapter 108. Yabamiya was taken aback. She looked at Amy, who was eating the rujiamo happily, with a strange expression on her face. She didn't expect this turn of events, which was completely different from what she had imagined. However, the way Amy ate was so adorable, and she was enjoying it so much. She was holding the rujiamo with both hands like a little squirrel, chewing happily. There was a little sauce at the corner of her mouth, and her little face was full of happiness and joy. Yabamiya, who was sitting opposite her, couldn't help swallowing her saliva. Although she hadn't tasted the rujiamo before, the rich aroma and the way Amy ate told her that it must be as delicious as the Yangzhou fried rice. Meg looked at Yabamiya, who was swallowing her saliva as carefully as she could. It was indeed torturous to smell such delicious food and watch others eat it. He looked at the rujiamo in his hand, hesitated for a moment, and then said with a smile, "You came here so early in the morning. Why don't you have a rujiamo first? You can deduct it from the lunch portion." No, it's not necessary. Didn't Mr. Mack say he would provide lunch? Yabamiya shook her head firmly. Then she looked at the rujiamo in his hand expectantly. But can I have 2 of these for lunch? Sure. Meg nodded and didn't force her. He didn't expect this girl to be able to resist the temptation of delicious food and follow the rules. Meow. Ugly Duckling, who was lying in Amy's arms, let out a long meow at Meg. It bared its little teeth and stared at the Yangzhou fried rice in front of Meg with longing in its eyes. It seemed that goat's milk couldn't satisfy it anymore. Father, can Ugly Duckling eat something else now? Amy looked at Meg. Ugly Duckling also looked at Meg expectantly. It's been less than a week. It can drink milk for 2 more days. Meg thought for a while, but still shook his head. Kitten's digestive ability was too weak. Although Ugly Duckling couldn't be treated as a normal kitten, the Yangzhou fried rice had all kinds of hard-to-chew side dishes, which were still not suitable for it. Meow. Ugly Duckling withdrew its gaze with a dejected expression. It looked up at the ceiling with tears welling up in its eyes. After breakfast, there were already customers lining up outside the door. I didn't eat anything yesterday. I'm starving. I need 4 Rugiamos this morning to replenish my energy. Harrison said with a smile. You look like you haven't eaten anything for the entire night, George said with a smirk. How did you figure that out? But today is the school day off. Why didn't Palmer come with you? Don't you usually like to stick to you? Harrison laughed dryly, and then asked curiously. George shook his head. I heard from him that there was a student who was much better at math than him. He was so sad when he went home last night. This morning, he woke up and started to memorize the multiplication table. No other restaurant would have such a long line so early in the morning. Moreover, Meg actually left those customers outside the restaurant to dry. He didn't even open the restaurant until opening time. She hesitated for a moment, but still held herself back from asking any questions. Her gaze landed on the back of the menu. There were 4 rules written in gold on it. No loud noises in the restaurant. Yabamiya became more and more surprised as she read the rules. In her mind, customers with money were the first priority. Even if they had some unreasonable requests, the restaurant would try its best to satisfy them. However, in Mag's case, he saw equality between the restaurant and the customers. Customers could choose to eat in the restaurant, and the restaurant could choose not to let customers eat in the restaurant. It was the first time she had heard of such a capricious two-way choice. She couldn't believe it was written on the menu. Put the bowls away. I'm going to open the door. The first day of work has begun. Meg swallowed the last mouthful of Rugiamo and smiled at Yabamiya. He stood up and walked to the door. Ding! He opened the door. Everyone smiled and greeted Meg. They complained about not being able to eat the delicious food yesterday, but overall, they were quite harmonious. Good morning, Mr. Mack. Crassus, who hadn't seen Meg for 2 days, came in with the crowd. He greeted Meg. His half-burnt beard was trimmed. Although it was a little short, it looked much neater. Good morning. Meg nodded and narrowed his eyes. This old guy is here again. It seems he's not going to give up. Half-beard Grandpa, you said you would treat me to food. I have something I want to eat today. Amy's eyes lit up when she saw Crassus. Chapter 109. Although Meg was a little disgusted with Crassus getting close to Amy, he did not have a valid reason to refuse him entry to the restaurant for the time being. After all, other than wanting to take Amy as his disciple, Crassus did not violate the restaurant's dining rules in any other way. In a situation where both parties were not equal in strength, he could not force him to leave, so he could only guard against him and prevent him from abducting Amy. Hearing Amy's words, the customers in the restaurant that night smiled knowingly. They still remembered the conversation between Amy and Crassus that day. Sure, just order whatever you want to eat. It's my treat, Crassus replied with a smile and walked over to the table where Amy was sitting. Then I'll have a plate of Yangzhou fried rice. A happy smile appeared on Amy's face. She looked at Crassus and said seriously, although I'm the one eating, you still have to pay me later. You said it yourself. I'll give it to you now. 6 gold coins. Crassus took out a money pouch from his chest and took out 6 gold coins and gently placed them in front of Amy. His expression was somewhat awkward, but he still seemed to be in a good mood. Thank you, half-beard grandpa. Amy accepted the gold coins happily. She raised her head and winked at Meg, her small face full of a scheming smile. Meg could not help but shake his head with a smile. This was what Crassus had promised Amy. His original purpose was to create an opportunity for him to be alone with Amy, but now it seemed that he had confirmed that Amy was quite talented. This was also good news for Meg. Even a magician like Crassus wanted to take Amy as his disciple. This showed that Amy was indeed very talented in magic. She might even grow into a powerful magician in the future. Just as Crassus said, only with great power could one survive in this world. Of course, Meg now had another idea. If he had enough capital, he could also exchange it for the confidence to survive in this world from the system. After all, it was not very reliable for Meg to slowly cultivate his own strength. Earning money from the system was a better way to go. Besides, the restaurant's upgrades and modifications were also a part of increasing his confidence. After Yabamiya brought the plates into the kitchen, she quickly walked out and stood beside Meg. She mimicked him with a smile on her face and legs together. Her posture was a little stiff, and her heart was pounding. She was so nervous that she felt that her mind was a little blank. Mr. Mack, who is this? Harrison asked curiously as he looked at Yabamiya. Although he could tell at a glance that she was a half-dragon, his eyes still lit up when he saw her in such a unique dress. He could vaguely see her delicate collarbone, her delicate calves in black stockings, and the white hair band on her head. It was a style that he had never seen before. Many customers were also looking at Meg and Yabamiya curiously. They were discussing this question at the entrance of the restaurant, so naturally, they wanted to get an answer from Meg. Amy was a half-elf, so her mother must be an elf. Yabamiya was obviously not Amy's mother. However, although she was a half-dragon girl, when she smiled, it was very comfortable. It was like a spring breeze, refreshing and pleasant, and it made people's moods subconsciously improve. She is Mia, the restaurant's new employee. Meg introduced her to the customers with a smile. Most of the customers who came to line up early in the morning were the restaurant's regulars. If they could accept Amy, then they would be more tolerant. It was clearly a good choice to let Yabamiya start her new job here. See, I told you she's a new employee. Harrison snapped his fingers and said proudly to George, who was behind him. He then gave Meg a thumbs up. Mr. Mack, you really have a good eye for employees. She's a perfect match for the restaurant style. Meg nodded with a smile. He liked hearing Harrison's words. He had always had a good eye for people. Yabamiya blushed slightly, not out of shyness, but rather out of excitement. This was the first time she had heard praise from a customer. Although it was praise for Meg, it made her feel flattered that she was a perfect match for the restaurant. Yeah, this girl is so beautiful when she smiles. It makes people feel better. George also nodded with a smile, and sat down with Harrison. All of the other customers also cast approving glances at her with smiles on their faces. Perhaps it was due to Amy's influence, but all of their prejudice toward half-breeds had already disappeared. Not only did they find Amy adorable, but they also found Yabamiya to be quite pleasant to look at. The smile on Yabamiya's face grew a little more confident. She straightened her back and felt less nervous, but she also felt that she had an extra responsibility on her shoulders. From now on, her words and actions would have an impact on the customer's impression of the restaurant. She couldn't let down Mr. Mac's trust in her. After the customers in the line had all entered, Meg gently let go of the doorknob and looked at Yabamiya. Relax, don't be too nervous. I'll take care of the first 10 customers' orders, and you'll take care of the ones after that. Can you do that? Yabamiya nodded solemnly. Her right hand was clenched into a fist, and she was clearly still a little nervous. Good luck, big sister Mia. Amy walked over with Ugly Duckling in her arms. She raised her little fist and looked up at Yabamiya with encouragement. She shook Ugly Duckling, indicating that it should do something as well. Meow, Ugly Duckling gave a perfunctory meow. Yabamiya nodded. She looked at Meg, Amy, and Ugly Duckling, and felt a warm feeling in her heart. Meg didn't say anything else. He walked into the restaurant and began to take care of the customers' orders. Mr. Mac, I want 3 plates of Yangzhou fried rice. 2 for now, and 1 for later, Crassus said to Meg with a smile. All right, please wait a moment. Meg nodded. One of the plates was naturally Amy's. He memorized the orders of the first 10 customers who entered the restaurant, and then quickly walked into the kitchen and began to cook. Yabamiya was a little nervous, and even a little stuttered when she spoke, but she still tried to keep a smile on her face as she began to take orders for the remaining customers. Ding! The bell at the door rang. Welcome. Yabamiya looked at Sargeras, who pushed open the door with an iron chair in his hand. His big bald head and the lava patterns on his skin were a little scary. She swallowed the last word unconsciously. Chapter 110. Yabamiya, who was a little nervous, was amused by Sargeras's words. Her nervousness disappeared in an instant. She suddenly felt that the customer who entered the restaurant, even if he was a demon, didn't seem so scary. A smile appeared on her face again, and she nodded. Welcome. Sargeras was taken aback by the smile on Yabamiya's face. Her smile was so pure, like the clearest dew on a mountain peak in the morning. Even his heart, which was wrapped in layers of lava, couldn't help but tremble. It turned out that there was such a beautiful smile in this world. Just looking at it made his depressed mood lighten up. He smiled, put down his iron chair, and sat down at the table near the door. It seemed that this girl was a new waitress. He tried to lower his voice and said with a smile, I'd like 5 Lagi Ruggiamos. Okay, please wait a moment. Yabamiya nodded with a smile and walked quickly to the kitchen. All the customers had finished ordering, and the waitresses were serving the dishes according to Meg's instructions. Morning, big bald guy. Although Sargeras looked fierce, she thought he was quite honest. Sargeras looked at her with great familiarity. Morning. Sargeras nodded quickly. Amy gave him the feeling that he couldn't afford to offend her. Besides, she was really cute. He couldn't stop laughing when she was digging a hole for Crassus. Today, seeing her sitting in front of Crassus made him want to laugh again. With Yabamiya's help, Meg only needed to focus on cooking in the kitchen. Ruggiamos were delivered to the customers one by one, and plates of Yangzhou fried rice were carried out of the kitchen. The efficiency of the cooking increased by at least 1/3. System, can I get a bigger oven? Meg asked as he looked at the bhaji bread in the oven. It would take about 10 minutes for the oven to finish cooking. The host is not authorized to upgrade the kitchenware, the system said. Then I won't upgrade it. Give me the same one, Meg said without thinking. Adding kitchenware is part of the restaurant's renovation. The host is not authorized to purchase it, the system said again. System, have you heard the story of Jobopi? The one where the rooster crows in the middle of the night. Meg raised his eyebrows. Please use the metaphor carefully. It's obviously not suitable for the current situation. The system didn't crow in the middle of the night. However, the system still suggests that the restaurant's business hours be extended to increase the turnover, the system said seriously. TSK. You still say that you are not Joe Boppy. Imitating a rooster is just a means to prolong the working time of the workers. Mag was a little disdainful. Then, he calmly said, System, I can't extend the opening hours by even a minute. I'm living a very comfortable life now. I don't have to worry about food and clothing. It's so hard to earn money, so spending 50,000 gold coins on a bunch of random things really doesn't interest me at all. The system fell into silence. After a while, it said tentatively, there are many benefits to upgrading the restaurant to level 1. You can unlock the right to purchase medium-sized kitchenware and existing kitchenware. You can add a basic protection system to the restaurant and improve the restaurant's safety. At the same time, you'll get a free exterior and interior renovation. These are just some of the benefits. There's a big surprise package waiting for you. Amy is super talented. I'll just be a salted fish dad. I'm not interested in the protection system. Meg was not interested. The system was silent for a long time. After Meg finished cooking 2 servings of Yangzhou fried rice, it seemed to have made up its mind and said, Small Rigiamo oven, 15 gold coins each. Limit, 1. Less? Meg raised the corner of his mouth, but still asked with a frown. The system's oven is very stable. The Bai-Ji bread it makes. The system said righteously. I don't want to hear it. Meg shook his head. He didn't want to listen to the system's promotion anymore. He said flatly, then I'll buy one. I'll receive it tonight. Although he looked calm, he was a little proud. It was a good choice to ignore the system strategically. Only in this way could he turn the seller's market into a buyer's market. Being a salted fish dad was not bad, but it was every father's dream to protect his daughter at a critical moment. This was his little blueprint. 15 gold coins have been deducted. The oven is being customized. Note, delivery tonight. A line of words floated in his mind, and the system went silent. Meg continued cooking in a good mood. Since Yabamiya had come to work, Meg had prepared 16 extra Bai-Ji bread in the morning. They were all sold out before the opening hours were over. The increase in efficiency was obvious. When the opening hours were over, Meg walked out of the kitchen and stopped Yabamiya, who was about to take the order with a smile. He looked at the customer with a smile and said, Sir, the opening hours are over, and the Rigiamo is sold out. If you want to eat more, please come back next time. I see. The customer was a little disappointed, but he had heard about the restaurant's rules. He had to turn around and leave. Mr. Mac, I see. Yabamiya looked at the customer's back and stopped on second thought. It was not good to turn down a customer like this. Our restaurant strictly follows the opening hours. It's been set since the opening day. Meg walked to the door and turned over the open hours sign. He explained with a smile. Yabamiya nodded thoughtfully and smiled again. That's right. Mr. Mac's restaurant is different from other restaurants. Mag looked at Yabamiya with an encouraging expression and said, although you've made 2 mistakes, it's already very good that you can do this on your first day. Keep working hard. Yes, I will. Yabamiya nodded seriously. Her face was a little red, and her eyes were bright and happy. She was recognized by the customer and praised by the boss. For the first time in her life, she realized that she could do something well. She was not a useless person. Meg nodded with a smile. Yabamiya looked delicate, but she was full of energy when she was working. She had done 4 tasks: reception, ordering, serving, and cleaning. Although she had made 2 mistakes, they were not serious. Besides, she had resolved the awkwardness with a sincere smile. It was completely beyond Meg's expectation that she could do so well on her first day of work. She was really talented in this area. That's right. Big sister Mia is awesome. We sold more this morning than before. Amy sat at the counter and counted the gold coins with stars in her eyes. Her love for gold coins was second only to delicious food. Then you can clean up the restaurant first. Also, come in. I'll teach you how to use this dishwasher. Meg led Yabamiya into the kitchen, opened the dishwasher, and taught her how to use it. It was an idiotic one-button operation. Although Yabamiya was amazed by the iron box that could clean the bowls in just a short while, she quickly learned how to do it. After all, everything in the restaurant was a novelty to her. She had never seen anything other than pots and pans before. Let's go, Amy. I'll take you out for a walk. We can buy some goat milk for Ugly Duckling. Meg walked out of the kitchen and took Amy out. The second benefit of having an employee was that he could free up some free time. Next up is a PY deal. I'd like to recommend my good friend Shi Chuanbai's Becoming a Stay-at-Home Dad. It's a very popular stay-at-home dad novel recently. I'm sure many people have read it, right? Well, I'm in CD. Maybe I'll have a meal with him in a couple of days. If you want to send me razor blades, I'll give it to him in person. Introduction: 500 years ago, Chen-Shi was swallowed by a spatial rift and entered the cultivation world. 500 years later, he returned to Earth after many hardships, only to find that only 5 years had passed on Earth. Outside the old courtyard, with a beautiful woman by his side and flickering candlelight. A cool breeze, half a moon, and peach blossoms still smiling in the spring breeze. Wait, whose child is this? Why is she calling me Papa? Chen-Shi was a little dumbfounded as he looked at the little girl in front of him. Becoming a stay-at-home dad after returning from cultivation. In this life, he didn't want to fight for the throne, nor did he want to be a tyrant. He only wanted to live a peaceful life and be a stay-at-home dad who dotes on his wife. Chapter 111. For lunch, Meg made Yabamiya 2 rujiamos according to her request. He and Amy each had a plate of Yangzhou fried rice and a rujiamo. Sister Mia, have a taste. The rujiamo is really good, Amy said as she ate her fried rice and looked at Yabamiya, who was holding a rujiamo in both hands. Okay. Yabamiya nodded and looked at the rujiamo in her hands with shining eyes. She had served so many customers in the morning and watched them enjoy the food with happy faces. She had swallowed a lot of saliva secretly. After a busy morning, she finally got her own rujiamo. She took a bite with a solemn and expectant face. This taste. Yabamiya couldn't help but exclaim. The rujiamo had 2 layers of soft and sweet baiji bread with tender braised meat. The delicious gravy overflowed and filled her mouth with tender braised meat. Every taste bud on the tip of her tongue was cheering and jumping with joy. Compared to the mild Yangzhou fried rice, this rujiamo was so much more stimulating that she couldn't help but close her eyes. After swallowing, the taste of the braised meat still lingered in her mouth. After swallowing it, the wonderful taste seemed to suddenly become a little violent, turning into a warm current that ran through her body, causing the blood all over her body to become restless. Her face immediately turned red, as if something wanted to drill out of her body, causing her to press on the table and stand up, opening her mouth to let out a long dragon's roar. One of the 2 buttons in front of the maid's dress burst open, revealing her fair skin. A dragon tail covered in golden scales suddenly sprang out from under the dress behind her, knocking the chair behind her to the ground. Meg and Amy raised their heads at the same time. Their throats moved, and they swallowed the rice in their mouths. Their expressions of shock were synchronized. Her dress also burst open. And is this atavism? Meg raised an eyebrow as he swept his gaze over Yabamiya's cleavage. He didn't think that there would be a maid who would have her clothes ripped off. However, his gaze quickly fell on Yabamiya's dragon tail that was peeking out from under her dress. The thumb-sized golden scales were densely packed together, and they shone like pure gold. They swept from side to side uneasily. If she completely transformed into a giant dragon, perhaps it would be a giant golden dragon. Wow, it's a dragon tail! Amy exclaimed as she looked at Yabamiya. Ugly Duckling also stuck its head out to take a look. Surprisingly, it wasn't afraid. Instead, it bared its teeth and extended its little paws as if it had seen an opponent. It should be fine. Meg's brows furrowed. If her atavism was toward becoming a giant dragon, then it should be a good thing for Yabamiya. After all, giant dragons stood at the pinnacle of the Norland continent, and they were born with immense power. Yabamiya stopped her dragon roar, and slowly opened her eyes. The golden light in her golden eyes slowly receded, and her cheeks were flushed. Her forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat, and her gaze was a little dazed. She felt as if a huge beast that had been trapped in her body all this time had been completely released in that instant. That feeling of satisfaction made her legs go weak. However, at the same time, wisps of warmth slowly converged on her body, as if a burst of strange energy were being injected into her flesh and blood. This was a sense of fullness that she had never experienced before, and it was so comfortable that she couldn't help but let loose a moan of pleasure. Her gaze then met the astonished gazes of Amy and Meg, who were holding spoons in their hands. She looked down at the gaping wound on her chest, and Yabamiya's flushed cheeks became even redder. She immediately straightened her body, and tried to cover her chest with her hands. She didn't expect that in her nervousness, the dragon's tail would knock the chair next to her to the ground. She turned around and her gaze fell on the dragon's tail that was exposed from her skirt. She exclaimed, "What? What is this?" Her little face paled and she was so anxious that she was about to cry. Meg stood up and gently placed a hand on Yabamiya's shoulder as he looked into her eyes, and said in a gentle voice, "Don't be nervous, Mia. You're a half-dragon, and after eating this Rigiamo, you might be experiencing atavism or evolution. This should be a good thing for you." She was only a 17-year-old girl, and her previous experiences had left her with a sense of insecurity. Furthermore, no one would be able to calm down after seeing a dragon tail suddenly appear on their body. Yabamiya looked into Meg's gentle eyes, and her emotions gradually calmed down. She grabbed onto her collar with one hand, and said with reddened eyes, But I don't want a tail. I don't want them to look at me strangely. It's already strange enough that I have a pair of dragon horns. If I have a dragon tail as well, why would they be strange? It's actually very cute." Meg shook his head with a smile as he looked at her with an encouraging gaze. That's right, that's right. What an adorable dragon tail. If big sister Mia becomes a giant dragon, then she'll be able to fly into the sky with little Amy and Ugly Duckling. Amy nodded with a serious expression. But I just want to be a normal person and be able to continue working at the restaurant. But now... Yabamiya wore a conflicted expression. She could feel the warmth of the hand on her shoulder, and she was also comforted by Meg and Amy's encouraging gazes. However, at the sight of the golden dragon tail behind her, her face was filled with helplessness and concern. Meg looked at Yabamiya with a hint of pity in his eyes. If a normal person were to learn that they could become a powerful giant dragon, their first reaction would definitely be to become excited. That kind of power that others could only look up to, as well as the opportunity to pay back all the grievances that she had suffered in the past. However, her first reaction was to worry that she would lose her job at the restaurant because of this new tail. It seemed that she didn't hold a grudge against her despicable boss, nor did she want to take revenge on those who had bullied her. She just wanted to live a peaceful life. Don't worry. Even with this new tail, you'll still be the only employee of the restaurant, Meg said with a serious expression as he shook his head. Mr. Mac. Yabamiya looked up at Meg with tears in her eyes. Also, maybe you can focus and try to put your tail away, Meg said with a smile as he removed his hand from her shoulder. Yabamiya wasn't the only one who had mutated after eating the Rugiamo. Amy and Sardras had both benefited from the Rugiamo, and the system had also promised that there wouldn't be any adverse effects, so perhaps this mutation could be controlled. Put it away. Yabamiya's eyes lit up. She slowly closed her eyes and clenched her fists tightly. After a while, a golden light suddenly flashed over her body, and the dragon tail that had poked out from under her dress suddenly disappeared. Ha! The dragon tail is gone, Amy said in surprise as she looked down. It really works. Yabamiya also opened her eyes immediately, and spun around in a circle in surprise. Her dress fluttered slightly, and the extra dragon tail was gone. She looked at Meg with excitement and said, Mr. Mac, I can really make it disappear. That's good. Apart from that, are there any other changes in your body? Meg asked curiously. He heaved a sigh of relief. Yabamiya clenched her fists to feel the changes in her body, and exclaimed in surprise, I feel like there's an endless supply of energy in my body. I won't feel tired even if I work for an entire day. Chapter 112. Yabamiya looked at the Rugiamo on the table with a conflicted expression. The taste of the Rugiamo was like a kitten scratching her heart. It was completely different from the Yongzhou fried rice. It would be a pity if she could only have one bite. Sister Mia, your bunny is out. Amy pointed at Yabamiya's chest. Yabamiya was taken aback. She lowered her head to take a look, and blushed immediately. She quickly turned around and buttoned up her shirt again. She turned around with a blushing face and lowered her head, not daring to look at Meg. Meg was calm. He had seen all kinds of things, so he didn't care about this. Yabamiya was still a little girl and a restaurant employee. Big Sister Mia, can't you put your tail away now? You can put it away after you finish the Rugiamo. We all think your tail is cute, Amy suggested as she ate a mouthful of fried rice. If you still want to eat, I think it's a good idea. Meg nodded. There were only 3 of them in the restaurant. Yabamiya looked at Meg and Amy's sincere eyes. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She picked up the 2 chairs on the floor and picked up the Rugiamo on the table. She took a deep breath and took another big bite. The delicious taste spread in her mouth and turned into a hot current that wreaked havoc. Yabamiya's tail, which she had just put away, darted out again. She didn't roar this time. Her chest rose and fell slightly, but she didn't tear her clothes apart. The golden dragon tail wagged happily behind her, and she finished the 2 Rugiamos in no time. She looked at the empty bag in her hand, and licked her red lips with her pink tongue. She still felt like she hadn't had enough yet. Big Sister Mia, isn't it super delicious? Amy asked with a hint of pride. Yes, Mr. Mac's Rugiamo was delicious. Before entering the restaurant, she had never tasted such delicious food. She couldn't even believe that such delicious food existed in this world. Also, I feel like the power in my body has increased a little after eating it. It seems to have a special effect on me. Then you can eat more in the future. A smile appeared on Meg's face as he took a bite of the Rugiamo in his hand. Amy's praises had changed from Amy's daily praises to Meg's and Amy's daily praises. It felt pretty good. After lunch, they rested for a while. When it was time for business, Meg opened the restaurant on time. Yabamiya couldn't control her transformation yet, but she could retract her tail after about a minute. It didn't affect her daily life, so she wasn't that worried. After the transformation, her strength had increased again. Even Meg was a little envious of her. There seemed to be limitless strength in her little body. She didn't feel tired at all even after going back and forth between the kitchen and the restaurant hundreds of times a day. Goodbye, Mr. Mac, Amy. After cleaning up the restaurant, Yabamiya smiled at Meg and Amy, who were preparing to do the dishes. She had smiled more today than she had in a whole year. She didn't know that work could be so cheerful. Goodbye, Sister Mia. Amy waved her little hand and hugged Ugly Duckling sleepily. Be careful on the road, Mag said with a smile. Okay. Yabamiya nodded seriously, and turned to leave. Meg put the last few bowls in the dishwasher. It was a lot easier with someone helping him. Although he had been cooking for a whole day, he didn't feel tired at all. It was indeed more tiring than cooking in the kitchen. Congratulations, host. You have completed the mission of selling 1,000 Rugiamos in 10 days. The tofu pudding recipe has been unlocked. Please enter the test field for the God of Cookery within 24 hours. The system's voice sounded at that moment. Finally, I've completed the mission. It wasn't easy. Meg looked at the glittering experience bag in his mind. It seemed that he would have to stay in the test field for the God of Cookery for a few months tonight. Sweet and savory tofu pudding were two completely different dishes. He carried the sleepy Amy and Ugly Duckling upstairs, washed up, and watched the two little ones fall asleep. Only then did Mag lie back down on the bed. He turned his head to look at the time. It was already 10 p.m. He slowly closed his eyes and entered the test field for the God of Cookery again. Apart from the savory tofu pudding and sweet tofu pudding, there was also a spicy tofu pudding option in the experience bag. However, it was gray and couldn't be clicked on, which meant that he couldn't learn it for the time being. Savory and sweet. Since I'm the boss now, I have to get all the customers and make more money. Meg smiled. He had made up his mind. As for whether or not it would cause a conflict between savory and sweet, that wasn't something he needed to consider. He wasn't like the fat boss, who was a staunch supporter of the sweet side. He wouldn't sell his restaurant to open a bar just because it sold savory tofu pudding. There was an additional refiner on the stove. It was cylindrical and was about the size of a rice cooker. Next to it was a wooden barrel and a brown earthen jar. On the ground, there were 2 large sacks of soybeans, gypsum, various condiments, and various side dishes that could be added according to one's taste. Everything that one needed was here. This should be the simplest dish. I should be able to get out of here as soon as possible. Meg thought to himself. He thought back to his evaluation of those tofu pudding shops years ago. His expression became a little strange. It seemed that things weren't as simple as he thought. The soaking time of the soybeans was directly skipped. The soybeans were crushed in the refiner and turned into fine soy milk. Then, the soy milk was poured into a wooden bucket covered with gauze and filtered. After that, the filtered soy milk was poured into an iron pot at the side and boiled over a large fire. He dissolved the plaster and poured it into the earthen jar. Then, he poured the boiled soy milk into the earthen jar. As time passed, a miraculous scene appeared. The originally thick soy milk started to solidify slowly and turned into a tender white tofu pudding. Making tofu pudding is really easy. Meg raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect to succeed on his first try. The color of the tofu pudding is slightly yellow, and the texture is slightly hard. Unqualified. The voice of the system sounded. It does seem to be a little yellow. Meg leaned forward and looked carefully for a while. It was indeed a little yellow. It seemed that although it was a little silly, it wasn't as easy as he thought. The time on the wall passed day by day. Meg went through hundreds and thousands of attempts and was rejected by the system again and again. System, it should be okay this time, right? Meg put down the 2 bowls of tofu pudding gently.